evening and welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is Jobs Development Authority meeting for Monday, March 7th. Welcome and roll call.
Weigel. Weigel.
Here.
Doppler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock.
Here.
Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen. Mayor Boczynski. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 2, JDA action items. 2.1, revised flex pace daycare request, hopeful beginnings.
Good evening. As your staff report notes, last fall the JDA approved financing assistance for Hopeful Beginnings Childcare to expand their services. As they move to closing now, interest rates have gone up, which to provide them the same level of interest buy down costs more money. So the request before you tonight is to increase that loan amount from the original amount was just under $126,000 up to $161,539. This will leverage a comparable increase from Bank of North Dakota in the form of a grant. That's the request. Certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing. Questions, comments?
Based on the recommendation from the Growth Fund Committee, I'll move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. And a second. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, C-Run Loan Request Country Club.
President Mock, members of the Jobs Development Authority. We have two C-Run loan requests before you this evening. Quickly, before I go into those, a quick update. The current balance that we have available is $393,000. If these two loans are approved tonight, the remaining balance is about $108,000. And we have a few pending applications which will use up the remaining funds. And those pending applications came after we had talked with our partners at SBDC, who would continue to promote the program and share the availability of the small amount of remaining C-Run funds. So that's kind of a quick update on where we're at with the C-Run loans. The one that I'm presenting before you now is the Grand Forks Country Club. They're a 501c7 not-for-profit organization established in 1930 who offers outdoor recreation such as golf, outdoor pools. They have food and beverage service and banquet space located out on Merrifield Road. They are outside of city limits, but this EDA program is for any businesses within Grand Forks County, so they are still eligible for the funds. As far as their COVID impact and contribution to economic resiliency, they had a rapid growth in membership brought on by COVID. They're needing to keep up with some maintenance needs and staffing needs, and so this working capital and equipment funds are to help them purchase necessary equipment and hire staff. Specifically, they'll be purchasing some Toro equipment for their grounds crew and hiring 6 full-time positions for their grounds and kitchen staff. For our review, we looked at collateral, debt coverage management, and debt to equity. Also considered their COVID impact, other assistance, certain current circumstances, and approach to recovery. We have no previous loans with the organization. For this loan, we are recommending up to $84,560 at 1% interest, a 6-month deferral, amortized over 60 months thereafter. We are looking for a blanket UCC lien on business assets and a purchase money security interest in the equipment purchase. And there's no personal guarantee as this is a not-for-profit entity. The last point to put on the record is Greg Syrup, who works for the Small Business Development Center, normally helps businesses go through the application process, but he sits as the treasurer for the country club. So he has had no involvement in this application, the review of the application, or assisting other applicants while this application was considered. So we just need to state that there is no conflict of interest and he was removed from the proceedings. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing. Comments and questions? Mr. Weber?
Thanks. First of all, congratulations on getting this money out. This is good news because these were federal dollars that came to the city. They're going into a revolving loan fund. If we didn't get these monies loaned out in the next couple of months, I believe, we were going to lose these dollars, and now they are into the local economy in a revolving loan fund. So nice work. There were times where it wasn't clear that we were going to be able to get that money circulated. I'll move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.3, C-Run and Flex Place Loan Request, eyesight RPV.
So Mr. Bombach from the Grand Forks Region EDC will present this project, or this package. A little bit of preamble. This is more of a typical EDA loan that you're probably used to seeing that leverages some private capital, but this is still a C-Run loan request. But I'll look to Mr. Bombach to present this application.
Thank you, Colin. Chairperson Mock, members of the authority, Brandon Bombach of the Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation. Happy to present this application. It's a two-part, as Colin just mentioned. It's both the flex-paced interest subsidy request as well as the C-Run, or what's similar to that EDA revolving loan fund request. This is within the sector of priority for our region of UAS and autonomous systems. So it comes to us from Eyesight Drone Services, or DBA, or Eyesight RPV Services, and they do have a DBA as an Eyesight Drone Services, professional group of unmanned aircraft pilots leading that drone industry across the nation. Last year alone, having inspected more than 16,000 wind turbines. They are in an interesting position too, where growth is upon them at the same time, due to COVID closing borders, could not even achieve the amount of growth that was ahead of them, not being able to travel out of the country. They have been needing to put more crews on the road and more vehicles on the road to carry those crews, as well as some of the equipment. So this request is to finance just over $500,000, 500, or the total project of $528,000. They themselves would put in $203,000 into that mix. They're requesting the $200,000 C-Run loan, as the program provides, and apply the interest rate subsidy to a first state bank loan of $125,000, buying that interest rate down to 1%. This loan to value on the property is 62.3%, very secure, where we'd like to see that. Secured by a corporate guarantee, as well as a personal guarantee of the owner, Tommy Kenville. This would be also secured on the property itself with UCC filings, both on the vehicles and on the drone equipment itself. This previous request had gone in front of the EDC board, as well as the Growth Fund just recently. I'm happy to stand for any questions. Also, Doug McDonald with the company is here as well, should there be any questions.
Thank you. Immediate questions? Let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing. Bring it back to the council, or JDA.
If I may quickly, one other thing that was mentioned during the Growth Fund Committee meeting, Mr. Kenville, this is a locally grown-owned company, and he expressed his commitment that his headquarters will always stay in Grand Forks, and I'll move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.4, partial release of mortgage request, Northdale Oil.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. This is regarding the JDA's first and only so far rural flex-paced loan. As you may recall, back in 2019, Northdale Oil was given flex-paced assistance to construct a convenience store in Thompson. At that time, the parcel that they purchased was very large. Your staff report has a drawing that shows it's now split into two lots, and the request is to release the mortgage on lot 2. The parcel that the convenience store actually sits on is lot 1, and that would be the parcel that remains to secure the loan. In the time that's passed, with the payoff of some of the outstanding loan, as well as the increase in value, the JDA's security position is slightly stronger, with loan to value at 75% now, whereas it was at about 78% when the initial mortgage was approved. So the request is just to allow that release of Lot 2 from the mortgage.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Seeing none. We needed a public hearing with this one, right? Ms. Richards? Okay, let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? And a second from Ms. Stockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.5, startup loan restructure request update reconsideration for Snack Shack.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. This was seen by the JDA late last year. The situation is Snack Shack was one of our earlier startup loan recipients. The business ran into some issues when the trailer, it's a food truck business, and the trailer was damaged. And so the business was unable to operate, and he was unable to make his loan payments. Last November, he did request an extension of his deferral to June of this year to allow him to get the trailer repaired and get back up and running. The JDA did approve that request, but on a temporary basis with a check-in after January. So when this was heard at Growth Fund Committee on February 28th, the recommendation was to proceed with the deferral subject to verification that, as Mr. Holt stated, repairs, or I guess basically a new trailer has been ordered. And so subject to confirmation of that, further check-in and then attachment of a UCC when the loan documents are rewritten to this trailer, recommended going ahead with the deferral. We have not been in contact with Mr. Holt since that Growth Fund Committee recommendation, but we continue to try. So I have no updates on confirmation of that purchase order for the trailer, but it is subject to him providing that confirmation, and we will continue to work on that. So the request is subject to those items, authorize the continued deferral through June of this year.
Thank you. Do we need a public hearing for that portion of it? Okay,
Yes.
Let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing, bring it back to JDA for comments, questions.
So one thing I wanted to chime in on, one of the items that we discussed was that if we were going to renegotiate the terms was to introduce a UCC. So it's one of the things that I think that the Growth Fund would ask for.
Correct. That would be one of the contingencies.
Did you need anything else, Mr. Kabami?
No, just wanted to make sure that was known.
Okay. Further comments or questions? Motions?
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Sure, I'll second. A second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.6, Tech Accelerator Professional Services Agreement Amendment.
Last month, the JDA authorized proceeding with construction at the Herald Building. As you know, we're getting an EDA grant to help fit it up as a tech accelerator. When the EDA grant was awarded, the JDA also approved extending JLG's contract to include services to complete the design and prepare EDA compliant bidding documents. Now, with the contracts awarded, we need to add this construction administration to JLG's contract. That was kind of previewed back when the initial expansion was approved last July, but obviously didn't want to add that to the contract until we were sure that the bids would come in and we would proceed. That has occurred, so we're requesting an addition of $52,000 to their existing contract to add construction administration services.
Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Seeing no one, let's close the public hearing.
I'll move approval.
Motion by Weber. Second.
Second.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is the Grand Forks City Council meeting for Monday, March 7th, 2022, under item 1, general business, 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Dockler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock.
Here.
Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
And Bean.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Under item 1.3. Oh, great. Okay, I'll figure it out. 1.3, mayor's announcements. I don't have any mayor's announcements. I do have a council president announcement. Today I'd like to state a proclamation regarding Music in Our Schools Month. Whereas the study of music contributes to young people's development, oh, and by the way, this is probably the most important thing we're going to do tonight. The study of music contributes to young people's development through heightened skills in listening, reading, self-expression, and creativity, and engages our youth in individual and group activities and provides a competitive edge for our students. And whereas music education in our schools includes a broad range of types of music and active musical experiences, and helps students acquire skills in production and performance of music, as well as an understanding of history and culture. Whereas music and other arts significantly enhance the morale and quality of school environment and plays a significant role in preparing children for a productive role in our society. Whereas the City of Grand Forks proudly supports our many students and teachers who dedicate their time and talent to music performance and education, and congratulate all for their extraordinary contributions to our community. Now, therefore, I, Dana Sandy, City Council President of the City of Grand Forks, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as Music in Our Schools Month in the City of Grand Forks, North Dakota, and call upon all citizens, teachers, and students to support the purposes and practices of music education in our schools. Sign me. Thank you. Under item 2, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations, item 2.1, English Coulee Phase 1 update. Good evening, Ms. Parvey.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the council. Tonight, thank you for allowing us an opportunity to share an update on a project that we've been working on. Myself and Meredith Quinn, who's with Advanced Engineering, have been working on, and a team of others, have been working on the English Coulee project. Phase 1 was water quality and channel improvement analysis. Issues with the English Coulee are probably known by many, but there's a number of different things that cause the coulee to be maybe not as good as it could be in our community. The algae, the stagnant water, debris that collects, as well as overgrown.
Ms. Parvey, do you have a presentation?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, is it not up?
Greta, can we get the presentation on the big screen, please?
Apologize. And then overgrown vegetation is also causing some issues. So in phase 1, we looked at engaging the community's interest in improving the coulee. There was a survey that was done. Over 500 people responded to a digital survey that we had, and we were quite impressed to show that most people support doing something, some sort of improvement to the coulee. The detailed report is available as well. I didn't have it before tonight. I will ask that we can link it on this agenda item so it's available to you as well, because there was a lot more community input taken, but we're just wanting to catch the high level this evening. Also, we wanted to understand water quality and the issues that we have with quality. And then considering everything that we were looking at, what are we really dealing with? And we recognized the high level of phosphorus in the sediment is causing some of the water quality issues. The last goal for phase 1 was to evaluate the balance of the English coulee's flood protection function with the potential changes on how the water flows throughout the coulee, to see if there's any opportunities for improvements. When we were doing this, we recognized the fact that the FEMA models that had been done previously, the orange, the simulated line there, actually were quite different than what was observed, and that'll lead us to wanting to study that a little bit more. So recommended next steps, we're looking at developing a hydrologic and hydraulic model, and that will allow us to look at what we have within the coulee, if there are any opportunities to increase flow or to allow additional flow through that, and determine the depth of that sediment throughout the coulee, like we had mentioned. Part of that could be allowing us to remove some sediment, and then continue engaging the public. Want to let them know what we're working on, how we're doing, as well as when we're able to, what opportunities for improvement are out there. There are not only the work that we're doing in Grand Forks, but there's also a lot of other work. UND has been working on improvements, Grand Forks Park District, the Audubon Dakota Society, as well as Grand Forks County Water Resource District, and then the residents themselves. Right now, the Grand Forks Park District and Audubon Society work with UND and the city, and we've got a couple different reaches where we're working on just cutting back invasive species, cutting back, I guess, any sort of vegetation that really is causing problems within those areas, and replanting it so that we've got more appealing vegetation occurring there, as you can see from a few of those photos. The one on the bottom right hand shows some of those improvements from last year. UND continues to do some of the same, working with the Dakota Audubon Society. They're really looking at taking those invasive species off of the bank and then allowing for more natural species to grow there. One of the projects that Sartoma Park is working on with the Grand Forks Park District by Sean Allen, he's been working with company IPS and Steady State Solutions, and they've come together and looked at using these biopods. That area gets kind of stagnant water. You've seen it probably like the right top photo where you get more algae growth in there. These biopods and some aeration actually cause, they're allowing the microorganisms or the microbes in there to actually eat some of that sludge and debris, or not so much the debris, I'm sorry, but eat at the sediment that's there so they can reduce that. And it improves the quality of the water there. So they had success last year and they're going to continue to do that this year as well. This project was brought before City Council a few weeks ago. Our engineering department's working with the Grand Forks County Water Board, or I'm sorry, the County Water Resource District and the State Water Commission, and looking at improving Legal Drain 9, which is kind of where the water starts to come into this area. We successfully had an intern working on the project last year, Savannah Shower. She worked last year, and she will continue to work on the project, and we're looking at an additional intern through the city of Grand Forks, or possibly some STEM opportunities for the community. But it was a lot of work, a lot of gathering data within the coulee, and she did a great job, so we're happy to have her. As we continue to look at how the coulee was in our community and what we need to go back to, I just want to reiterate that we want to look at developing that hydraulic model, and then we also want to look at that phosphorus sediment and what we need to do with that, whether it's dredging that out or how we can remove that, as well as continue to engage the public. So we answered the question initially through some public outreach, water quality and sediment data, and then again looking at how the water flows through that area and if there are improvements, what those can be. In more detail, we'll really need to work with the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA if we're going to make improvements. And so these are the next steps, which we've highlighted. We'll also be bringing before a task order in either the next meeting or the following one for you to recommend, for our recommendation for you to approve phase 2 of this project, which would be that next step for us to gather additional data and then bring it back to you for improvements that we can make in this asset to our community. And that's it, President Sandy.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Parvey? Mr. Veen?
Yeah, a couple questions. What's the extent of the coulee that's being researched right now? Where does it start? And I know you said it went down to 24th. I'm assuming that includes some of the tributaries to the coulee too? Because it does branch out in a couple different directions. And of course, this is in my ward on the south end, so I'm very interested to hear what you're doing either now or at another time.
We did have 8 different sections. I do have a map of it that I could pull up too as well, but it was everything within city limits that we're currently looking at. So those 8
Okay.
points that we decided to study right now are mostly in the urban section of the coulee.
Okay. So
And I can share those spots too that we looked at where we gathered the
yeah, I can talk to
water
you separately
quality.
about that. This is overdue and appreciate the work.
Absolutely.
Mr. Weber?
Can you give us an idea of the source of all this excess phosphorus in the city limits?
Right now, I guess we just need to continue to look at the areas where we've got high levels, and then we can make a little bit better recommendation as to where that could be coming from. We have some ideas currently, but really want to make sure that we know the areas of town that we're having those higher levels. And we've never dredged it. We've taken small amounts of sediment out, but it just continues to build.
Right, so it's accumulating over time, but
Correct.
I mean, phosphorus isn't coming from the rain. We don't, I think we have some pretty good ideas where this is actually coming from, don't we?
From buildup of accumulation, and that's where we're looking at kind of everything from in the urban sections, what we have and how much, and that sediment that we're actually going to gather this next phase will help us really understand the depths of that. So we don't have a real good answer. We just know it's at a higher level and need to look at where and how we want to address that.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Ms. Parvey, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Dorstead, 2.2, COVID-19.
Yes, COVID-19 update.
Mr. Dulitz, good evening.
Council President Sandy and members of the council, I'm Michael Dulitz with Grand Forks Public Health, here to do a COVID-19 update. Looking at our week in review, more good news with only 75 cases recorded in the past week in Grand Forks County. That brings our total incidence since the start of COVID to 22,000. Our percent positivity is down despite our tests still being at a very acceptable level. The only thing that I do note on here is that we are still seeing some deaths getting reported out from the early part of this Omicron outbreak. So there is a little bit of lag time, but we did see some additional deaths reported out, including 2 reported out last week that occurred previously. The only spot really where we're seeing, cases still staying, a teensy bit higher is the 30 to 39 age group with that case rate up over 25 per 100,000. Otherwise, we're seeing kind of good things down the line with our case rates falling steadily in all of the age groups in Grand Forks County. One thing that we do want to note with this outbreak, we've seen a total of 18 deaths with the Omicron outbreak, 17 recorded as of today. But we did see a real decoupling between both deaths and hospitalizations and COVID cases. It basically bore out what we expected it to bear out of the experience of South Africa, where we'd see this really rapid spread of COVID. It would, end up just as quickly as it started, and we'd see hospitalizations and deaths staying lower. So that has really been the case in Grand Forks County. There is still a human cost to this outbreak, but it did decouple. Whereas before we would see cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, and they'd follow pretty linear or they'd couple together pretty well. Whereas now they kind of decoupled. And the other thing with the decoupling of the hospitalization rates is that we see that decoupling of the hospitalization rates compared to previous outbreaks. So whereas before we were at about 3%, now we're back down to about 1% of our cases resulting in a hospitalization. With that, hospitalizations have decreased very steadily over the past month or so. So because of the changes that we're seeing in the decreasing COVID case counts, as well as some actions by the CDC, it did cause us some interest in re-looking at the dashboard to see if we could make it better fit what was going on in the community. So we last changed the health officer's dashboard in the summer of 2021. We first created it in the summer of 2020. The reason why we created the dashboard was a lack of available methods to assess COVID risk. So there was a lot of measures thrown about, but we didn't really have a good idea on how to put those all together and say, here's what your risk is. So this did come out in the summer of 2020, and we've held on to it since then. We've modified it only slightly since then. The biggest modification coming in the summer of 2021, where we significantly increased the weights that we put on the case rate as well as the hospitalization. This led to when our case rates were up over 25 for over 180 days, and our hospitalization capacity was constrained for over 180 days, put us in the orange category subsequently for over 180 days, which led to some questions on the utility. There was still impact that we were seeing, so in many ways the dashboard was still functioning as intended, but with the Omicron outbreak, we saw that decoupling, and that gave us a good opportunity to relook at our risk levels. The CDC recently came out with new risk levels. They're using a 3-category system based off of case rate, the number of hospitalizations, and the percent of hospitalizations that compose the overall number of inpatients. So the changes that we are pursuing that will come into effect tomorrow will be to remove the health officer's dashboard score and risk level. We will be removing those, and we will be moving to the CDC COVID-19 community level as the primary indicator of COVID risk that we'll be putting out on a daily basis. And then we'll be doing a little bit shorter report. It will cut off about 3 of our slides. So what does that look like? This will be a lot shorter report. So for Grand Forks reported out today, we had 102 total cases per 100,000 in the past week, 8 total hospitalizations per 100,000, and 2.7% of our staffed hospital beds were used for COVID inpatients. So that put us, based off of our calculation, at a low level. The CDC only updates their website on a weekly basis, and so we are still at a medium level on there. So low level comes with no recommendations as far as masking. A medium level comes with recommendations for masking in people in certain high-risk settings. But this does show, it does kind of bear out the decreases that we have been seeing overall. We will still include the previous metrics for the Grand Forks County Health Officer's dashboard, and the individuals will still be able to calculate that score if they see that fit. It'll be included on the second page of the dashboard, and we'll still include the total case counts and the number of tests done, et cetera, on there as well as the same charts. In closing, I want to thank everybody who is listening, who's listened to these presentations. This is my 11th presentation since August, and I've heard really good feedback from the community that they do rely on these presentations, as well as these being on the city council agendas. As onerous as it may be to hear this over and over again, I do want to thank both everybody on the council as well as everyone who does listen to these reports. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Dulitz? Yeah, Mr. Weber?
Mr. Dulitz, Mr. Swanson, is there a circuit breaker at which point we would bring the local health dashboard back?
Councilmember Weber, there would still be the ability to bring that health officer dashboard back. It's, all the data is automatically pulled on a daily basis. The methodology is still there. If needed, we could bring that back. Right now, it's a little bit confusing, and we were getting a lot of feedback with the change in the CDC levels, where it was confusing that we had our color levels, and then the CDC had their levels, and they weren't updating it very often. So we're ending up reporting out 3 different colors on a daily basis, and it just was not. It wasn't operating very well for the individuals who were using that to make decisions on a daily basis. So that was the feedback we got. The CDC felt very confident that their recommendations fit well as well. So that kind of prompted the move.
I'm not questioning dropping the local information, and you're still providing the local information, but my question is there a circuit breaker at which we would bring back the kind of reporting that you've been doing?
Councilmember Weber, there is no specific circuit breaker that would cause us to switch back to the health officer's dashboard, but you will still get the same data sent to you on a daily basis.
I think that our community experienced some great benefit from that work that you've been doing over the last couple of years. It's wonderful that we're at a point today where that doesn't seem to be necessary, but we'll just trust our health officer and the health department to make good recommendations if it seems like it's necessary to bring that back again. Thank you, Mr. Sandy. President Sandy.
I go by either. Thank you, Mr. Weber. Any other comments, or I go by a lot of things, actually. Thank you, Mr. Dulitz, and truly, thank you for all of your efforts. I know this has not been easy, your position has not been easy to walk into and easy to deal with, and I know that, and probably some of it was my fault, but I do really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you so much.
And the whole health department. Thank you. Mr. Orsted, item 3.
3.1 is a public hearing and approval of application for property tax incentive, a pilot from Olivan Boutique Hotel. There's 9 exhibits related to the item in front of you tonight. And then we've also included previously distributed information that's related. President Sandy, would you like me to read all 9 exhibits?
I'd really prefer you don't.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move approval.
There's a motion by Mr. Weber. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Mock. Are there comments? We are going to have a public hearing. I will open a public hearing, but we did have a motion and a second. Are there any other additional comments prior to opening the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone interested in speaking on item 3.1, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Gosted, did you want to give a brief overview of the pilot process first before we take action?
I certainly can if the council wants me to. Again, what the pilot is about is a payment in lieu of taxes. It's replaces the property tax. It only applies to buildings and structures. It doesn't apply to land. It can last up to 20 years. With the Olivan, it's only a 10-year pilot because the first 5 years are under the Renaissance Zone. We've gone through all the processes that we're supposed to go through. The Local Governing Advisory Committee has reviewed this on January 12th, 2022. Because this is more than 5 years, we've approached both the county and the school district, sent them the required statutory letters, and they've responded positively to the pilot as presented here tonight. Tonight, again, is the public hearing that was set. We did publish the notice to competitors as required by the statute. And what you are approving really is the resolution that was, I think it's Exhibit 1. And the resolution just goes through and makes certain, describes what the property is that's the subject of the pilot. That's Section 1.1 of the resolution. 1.2 just describes the project itself, the hotel, and there's an exhibit attached to the development agreements, Exhibit 1.23, that gives a little bit more detail as to what the project is. It's a little different in that part of the property will continue to be fully taxable after the Renaissance zone. And so there'll be some calculations to evaluate that portion of it that'll be subject to the pilot, the hotel portion of it, and portions of the property that will continue to be taxable. I think the existing building, the Edgewood building, floor 1 will be partly the hotel and partly not the hotel. So that floor will be segregated between, that's part of the pilot and that would not be part of the pilot, and that's the same with floor 3. So Mr. Hodak will have some work to do those calculations because he will certify that pilot on an annual basis. And that's the beauty of what the city has done. We use actual numbers, so it's the actual assessment that we utilize and the actual mill rate that we utilize for that portion of it that continues to be taxable. Because not all of the hotel is free from property taxation. First 5 years is 10%, and the second 5 years is at 20%, and then after the pilot is done, it's fully taxable. The resolution also sets forth various findings as far as this development meeting, land use, and other aspirations for downtown. That's set forth in the resolution. And then it just goes through each of the requirements that we're supposed to go through by statute. That can be found in sections 1.1 through 1.13. And then at the end, the council is determining that there would be no unfair competition and it's in the best interest to apply or to allow for this pilot. So what you're doing is approving the pilot, or excuse me, approving the agreement that's been presented and approving the pilot for this particular property with this resolution.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gosted. Any other questions for Mr. Gosted or for the good of the order? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, 3.2, public hearing and approval of application for property tax incentive, a pilot from Fufang USA Incorporated, the Fufang Wet Corn Mill. Exhibits 1 through 9 are attached for the item before you tonight. Also, citizen comment that came in today. All the items below that are from previous meetings and previous discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Storsted. Mr. Gosted?
I can just briefly go through, again, you're approving the resolution that's attached. I think it's Exhibit 1. Again, describing the property. It's part of the property that is described that where the buildings would be located. It's important also to recognize that this pilot doesn't become effective until there's substantial completion of the project. So that won't be for 2 years, assuming that all the terms and conditions of the development agreement are satisfied. During that interim period of time, the property will continue to be subject to property tax, the buildings and the land. Again, the land will continue to be subject to taxation. The resolution makes reference to that this project is consistent with the long-term land use plan for the city. That's at section 1.3. 1.4 through 1.6 sets forth various findings as far as the economic impact of this project, and those are all based upon previous presentations that the City Council has heard. We go through again sections 1.7 through 1.10, describing the statutory requirements that we're supposed to go through with respect to a pilot agreement, and then that there is no unfair competition and that this is the best interest of the city. Again, you're approving the agreement and the pilot. A couple things, again, I want to point out is, again, we do this actual amount, so as the value of the building will have to be evaluated on an annual basis, we'll do the math as to how much of the percentage of that value of the buildings would be excluded from the property tax. And for the first 10 years, it's at 90%, and the second 10 years is at 75%. So part of the property continues, part of the structures continue to be subject to property tax, and 100% of the land is still subject to the property tax. And then we'd apply that value, that reduced value after taking those deductions, those percentage deductions off and we'd apply the mill rate in effect for that particular year. And that's why I say we use the actual process. So the amount of the property tax, the payment in lieu, will change on an annual basis, depending on what the values are and depending on what the mill rates are. The agreement in section 3.2 provides an illustration only. Doesn't mean we're going to get to those numbers, but it's an illustration of where things would lie. And there's also a property tax calculation that was attached, I think is Exhibit 8 or 9, I can't remember which one it was, that sets out what the property tax revenue would be even under the pilot that would be granted tonight over the course of the next 20 years. And so if you'd basically apply, assuming the numbers are arrived at under the example in the agreement, the true and full value that would be applied with respect to the mill rate is anywhere from 60 million on years 1 through 10 to 113 million in years 11 through 20. Again, remember, this is under assumptions as to what the values are going to be, and we're targeting something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's precisely the value to get to. It's just an example. And again, Mr. Hodek or the city assessor's office will be making that assessment on an annual basis and certify that payment in lieu by November 1 of each year. Again, there's a number of conditions like there was with the Olivan, one of which that's more unique to this one is that all the conditions preceded in that development agreement that we've talked about with respect to the construction of the infrastructure have to be satisfied in advance of the pilot becoming effective. The project has to become substantially completed, which means that it has to be operational. There hasn't been any default under the agreement, and this is an ongoing process. There are a number of representations and warranties that we ask the developer to make under section 4.1. On each assessment date, there has to be an evaluation that those representations and warranties continue to be true. There are remedies for default. Basically ending the pilot would be the remedy, and then the entire property would be subject to property taxation at that point. Also, a couple of items I want to point out. The property during the pilot period would not be eligible for any other property tax incentive. That's at section 6.3. And the property would continue to be subject to special assessments. That's at section 6.1. So unless anybody has any questions, this is a pretty similar type of development agreement, except a lot of the terms that you see in other development agreements about construction terms and things like that are contained within the development agreement, so I didn't need to duplicate it. I incorporated those within this pilot agreement.
So a standard pilot agreement?
It is.
Yes. Any questions for Ms. Mock?
I just wanted to bring up the subject of recusal. I did have a conflict of interest with the development agreement and those other attachments, and so I wanted to bring that forward in case we wanted to discuss that as a council. Mr. Gosted or Mr. Sandy, if you want to say anything.
I would recommend we make the motion to allow you to vote, and then we vote it down. That's what I would suggest, similar to how we managed the development agreement. But yes, Mr. Weber.
I'll second the motion.
I didn't make the motion. I'm suggesting we should make the motion.
I'll make that motion with the suggestion that it's been my experience with Representative Mock that her integrity is sterling, and I trust that she would make sound judgments, and I don't believe that she or any other council members are making a dime off of this deal, and so I don't see any conflict beyond what she's described, and I appreciate her describing that, but I'll make that motion and plan on voting in favor of that motion. Thank you, President.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Mr. Veen. Other comments, Mr. Veen?
No, I plan on voting in favor of it too. I think that, I'm not for sure I see the conflict myself personally.
But just again, I'll point out that she is partial owner of AE2S, which does stand to benefit financially. she does have a financial conflict.
AE2S does work throughout the city on lots of things, so.
And she is recused every time. So there's a motion and a second. Again, I'm going to vote no. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Aye. Yes.
Those opposed? No.
No.
Aye. No.
Right, motion fails. Weber and Veen approve. Thank you. Any other comments, or Ms. Mock, did you have any other general comments?
No, I just wanted to bring that up. I'll comment later.
Thank you. Well, I believe we have a public hearing on this meeting this evening. I think we'll open the public hearing. I have several speaker cards for multiple topics tonight. In the interest of allowing everyone to speak, rather than setting a time of 3 minutes, I'm going to let everybody speak for 4 minutes tonight. And but we are going to be generally sticking to the 4-minute limit. So I will call the names. If people are interested, Mr. James Kelso, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please. Mr. Kelso.
This will just be a bullet list that I can read in 4 minutes as to why the Food Fund project is a catastrophe for Grand Forks, for the state of North Dakota, and for America. And it's shameful what you intend to do, especially you, President Sandy. In no special order, here are my bullet points. President Sandy has a severe conflict of interest, a severe appearance of impropriety. Everything you've done has been in violation of sunshine and public meetings laws. You're acting outside of your legal authority. You're lying to the citizenry. At a ward meeting last week, and I believe an attorney for this organization said there was no communist influence in the communist CCP-run company, Fufeng. The action appears to be rushed, I was told, by a city council member. And this is mind-boggling. That council member explained, staff and some members, it does appear to be rushed, Mr. Kelso, but that's because we were setting this up much earlier. We didn't make it public because we were afraid of losing the deal. Wow. 6.6 million gallons per day, which equals the water consumption of Grand Forks. Mind-boggling. And of course, that's what they say they're going to use. Water quality. The only council member who has expertise in water quality has recused herself. Great. Question, when the Chinese Communist Party starts the murder of the people of Taiwan, which can be expected in the next year, will the City Council of Grand Forks still be bending over backwards to be, as we heard from Todd Phelan, good and reliable partners of the Chinese Communist Party? Unbelievable. In your plan here, you intend to divert North Dakota's rivers and waters to the CCP, to pay for the construction of hundreds of miles of gas pipeline for the benefit of the Chinese Communist Party. This is an action of major national importance, major state importance. It is within the customary and normal authority of a part-time city council, maybe Congress, especially when we get a new Congress in 8 months. The Fufeng intended site is not even in the city. Where do you get the authority? It's in the county. The county commissioners have jurisdiction. I'm very sad to say those idiots agreed with your rush job, but we can undo that. Question, what deal maker has been reassuring this Chinese Communist Party that annexation, that deal will be greased? Rush. We have, of course, the current massive genocide in China, and the Chinese are backing the genocide in Ukraine. Good group to sign up with. China gave the essential green light to Putin's genocide ongoing. Joe Biden countermanded President Trump's executive order that led to the opening of 2,000 theft spying cases.
30 seconds, Mr. Kelsey.
Okay. The Communist Chinese Party has an emphatic priority of buying up American land and farmland. Is Dana Sandy registered with the federal government as a foreign agent? If that is law. People are in jail now for not doing that. Why did one of the council members tell us, the opponents of this travesty, last week, that he only learned of the Fu Feng operation in November?
Thank you, Mr. Kelson. Thank you.
And there's much more.
I'm sure. Ms. Jody Carlson?
This has to be voted upon by us.
State your name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to come to speak. My name is Jody Carlson. I live at 5124 Belmont Road in Grand Forks. Thank you, really, for the opportunity to speak, and the gentleman that was just up here, I appreciate that. I'm usually not nervous, but I am tonight. Let me take a breath. It's interesting to me that this project has been going on for so long, and now we're finding out about it. Just last year, I live on the part of Belmont Road where we had some road construction done, and I received 5 letters from the city about putting in curbs and lowering our roads. But yet I have not received one single letter from the city regarding the addition of this Fu Feng factory. And I think that that's something much more important to the citizens of this community rather than sidewalks and gutters. When I looked up the City Council of Grand Forks, one of the things that I saw on the website, one of the very first things that I saw on the website, I'm going to grab my water just real quick. I'll stop and turn. One of the very first things that I saw on the website under the City Council, it says transparency. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Transparency, what does that mean? And it says, and either you need to update this page or you need to follow it. It says that the City of Grand Forks takes great pride in believing that an informed public is the best assurance of a good government. I take a look at that again because there has been no transparency whatsoever with this. And my understanding is that this started back in 2019, 2020, a long time ago. The plan, according to, and I'm gonna rattle off some numbers that go along with the agreement here, okay? It's 3.2.6C. It says construction shall commence spring of 2022. 3.26. The city, quote, city, shall approve all costs, expenses, and fees for infrastructure plans and structures. And the agreement, the actual agreement itself, it says it's agreement between the developer, which is still unnamed in the copy that I had, and the City of Grand Forks. So interestingly enough, I always like to look up definitions to see what those mean. And if you look on the first page of that agreement, city is defined as the City of Grand Forks, okay? That would be these good people and myself, as well as any of you that, you know, live in the city. There is also another definition for city council, which says the city council of the city consists of the mayor and the council members. So the agreement is not between the developer and the city council, although it is, because there is no city input. I know for myself, Mr. Kwame, I'm not sure why he's not here tonight. Between myself, he is our ward person. We have attempted to contact him 7-8 times by multiple means. We get no response. No return calls, no return emails, nothing. And I hear the same. I'm in the process of doing petitions, looking at being able to stop this process and put it to a city vote, and that will happen. So plan accordingly, whatever you need to do as far as your future plans with that, because we are working very hard on that. We know all about the potential environmental risks, and interestingly enough, that we have somebody that recuses herself that actually has some expertise on that. Mayor Bochensky on the radio indicated, when talking about the smell and whatnot, that we live in a cold weather climate, and he anticipates that the wastewater will be covered by the cold climate that we live in, and assumes that the odor will be within domestic limits.
I'm going to ask the police to escort you out. Please.
What am I saying that's wrong?
Your time is up.
I have 4 minutes.
You've already used 6 minutes.
No, I have not.
Yes, you have.
Okay, so I have a lot more to say, and nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants
to sit down. I'm happy to sit down and talk to you.
Conflict of interest?
I have no conflict of interest.
Yeah, you do.
I don't. I'm happy to.
Check your pockets, because there's more conflict of interest there
Thank you.
than you can even imagine.
Um,
And why are we not involved? Why doesn't it go to a city vote? What are you afraid of?
Mr. Ross Kennedy, please.
What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? I've heard you on the radio too.
Are you done?
No, I'm not done.
And President Sandy, if anybody wants to turn their comments in, they can submit them and we can
turn in
attach
your
them.
comments and we'll
I do, but I get no response.
You haven't messaged me.
Actually, I have messaged our mayor, Bochensky.
Okay.
And I have messaged Mr. Kwame.
I'm sorry.
And I get no response.
Send me a
My
message.
husband gets no response. Any of these people out here that are arguing the point of this. So my question to you is, why is it not put to the vote of the city?
Because the citizens did vote when they elected us.
No, they didn't. No, they did not. Okay, you know what? You are elected to represent the opinions and what the people of your ward want. That's what you are elected for.
That is a fact.
So do you know what the opinions of the people who live in your ward
I do.
are? Have you asked them?
I do.
What are they?
Other than the people in this room, everyone in our community is in favor of this project. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr.
I'm gonna head over to the hospital and get your psych ward. You are crazy.
Perhaps. Okay, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, please. Name and address. Mr., you're from Columbus, Ohio?
Yes, sir. Ross Kennedy from Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As I am certain the council is obviously aware, the Fufang Group project has achieved an unexpected level of local and national attention, and much of it uncomfortable for the city. The talking points about tax revenue and jobs are overshadowed by constituent concerns of involuntary annexation, environmental quality, and the firm's connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Indeed, one can imagine the frustration of Mayor Bochensky and City Council President Sandy at having to explain numerous times that, quoting Mayor Bochensky's a post of his on Facebook, the company is an American subsidiary of a publicly traded company that has zero government ownership, end quote. This, of course, is one of those rhetorical dodges that politicians are very adept at using. Fufang USA is a wholly owned subsidiary of Fufang Group, which is legally headquartered in the Cayman Islands despite being physically located in the Shandong province of China and traded on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. This practice of Chinese firms domiciling in the Caymans is designed to make it easier for these firms to evade scrutiny by Chinese and American authorities. To the matter of the council and mayor repeatedly stating that there's no connection between Fufeng Group and the CCP, a basic grasp of Google and a little time will show this to be false. In the biography section of Fufeng's annual report for 2006, it is noted that, quote, Mr. Li is a member of the Shandong Province's 10th People Congress. In 2003, he was also named as model laborer of the Shandong Province, end quote. Translated, he was part of the state legislature of the province, which enacts the policies of the National Chinese Communist Party, and was named Businessman of the Year for the province. Subsequent press releases from the company on other occasions note that Fufeng is an important and loyal stakeholder in supporting party strategies for global agribusiness dealings. Further, Fufeng was sanctioned in April 2021 by the European Union for price manipulation of monosodium glutamate, or MSG. This EU ruling notes its concern at the numerous connections between Fufeng's founder and chairman and the CCP, and the firm's role in willingly acting as an economic instrument of CCP policy worldwide. Copies of this information can be sent upon request to the council or constituents. This failure of even basic due diligence by the city is made even more concerning, given that City Council President Dana Sandy is the longtime Vice President of Business Development for UND Aerospace Foundation, which has counted China as one of its most important country partners and sources of revenue for decades. Mr. Sandy has undoubtedly been briefed on FIRMA, CFIUS, and other mechanisms used by the United States to monitor potential economic and national security threats involving foreign investment into critical technologies or property close to military installations. That none of these things have been publicly dealt with in the proper manner is a curious omission. Whether any of us like it or not, there is no longer any plausible deniability or middle ground, especially for elected officials who accept taxpayer money and the prestige of leadership, knowing the responsibility and obligations that follow. Ultimately, this is the real crux of the matter. The Chinese Communist Party knows that city councils, state legislators, and governors are most vulnerable to persuasion via the promise of jobs and economic growth, and that exploitation of this fact can effectively undermine the United States' ability to detect and prevent threats. In a white paper released in 2019, the Minshi International Research Institute, a CCP-aligned think tank that operates as a prominent node in the CCP's global propaganda system, said, in Washington, voices advocating a tough stance on China seem to have become mainstream and have growing momentum. However, in American politics, in addition to the White House and Congress, there is another type of decisive actor, the governors. Because of the federal system in the United States, governors can ignore the White House's orders, and each federal member, that being the governors, enjoys a certain degree of diplomatic independence, end quote. While it's a cute tactic by the mayor and the council to tell the media and worried stakeholders we're just a government with limited resources, it betrays a lack of commitment on the part of the council to its obligations to the city, the Air Force Base nearby, and the nation. Given that zero effort has been put into submitting this project for the federal entities, the state level entities, the whole mechanisms we have to review, it's more accurate to say that the council's attitude seems to be that going 100 miles an hour in a school zone isn't illegal simply because no cops caught you doing it at that time. Claiming ignorance of the legal proceedings and now actively choosing to not comply does not reduce the exposure of everyone involved to the consequences for knowingly avoiding these protocols of national security. These can include up to $250,000 per person fines under FIRMA, lengthy and painful review of personal finances and relationships with all foreign actors involved, and obtrusive scrutiny of every detail of the project by federal agencies. One final point of concern as I close, I must note in this limited time available that Council President Sandy and Mayor Bashensky have repeatedly assured everyone that the leadership at Grand Forks Air Force Base has reviewed and cleared this project. I know for a fact that this is an outright lie. No one involved in the base's chain of command, from the greenest airman up to the Commander-in-Chief of the United States himself, has been presented with the facts of this proposal and helped the Council initiate a proper multi-agency review. What has happened is that base leadership has been dragged into a fight not of their own making, because their good name was publicly and inappropriately used to reassure everyone here and everyone watching at home that this project presents no risk to the national security of our country. A single colonel, however highly decorated and respected, does not have the authority to make this determination. In fact, any service member who took it upon himself to do so would face immediate investigation by military authorities and grave risk to their career.
Please wrap up.
And any civilians involved potentially face investigation by the FBI. In summary, the council has already knowingly violated multiple acts of Congress, presidential executive orders, and decades of legal protocol to push this project to a point of initial funding.
Thank you.
I will conclude with this. A carrot and a stick. The carrot is put a 90-day pause in this process to allow a consortium of American investors and regional agribusiness professionals to present a solution to this council that replaces Fufeng under the same general development agreement, does not annex any additional property into the city, and provides for alternative mechanisms to add substantial revenue to the city's budget each year.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
The stick then is this project being tied up in court for years. Every single avenue of relief for the council closed off, lost revenue and jobs, and the knowledge that the Chinese Communist Party is correct in its belief that the most effective weapon against the United States is 30 pieces of silver wrapped in a box of promises to state and local officials.
All right.
All that's left now is a fluid choice. The Chinese are betting on one. I and everybody here are hoping for the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Todd Leak. Todd Leak. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Todd Leak. I live at 2371 10th Avenue Northeast, Emory, North Dakota. Thank you, President Sandy and council members, and particularly thank you, President Sandy, for stating on KNOX last week that you would not go forward with this proposal if it was found that Fufeng could not prove that they do not use forced labor in Xinjiang. I'm here as a member and a stockholder of two different co-op elevators in Grand Forks County. I believe that this hearing allows competitors to speak on behalf of the exemption, the pilot exemption. As was testified by Mr. Hager two meetings ago, he said that he could probably pass his local elevator and go straight to Fufeng if he wished. That is true. As I've stated before, I have no problem with another corn buyer coming to town, but not a corn buyer subsidized at $106 million. This is going to cause economic damage to existing co-op elevators and other privately owned elevators in the region. It's going to bypass corn from their facilities. It's going to cause economic hardship to the towns that they're in. I might just say that over the decades, the city of Grand Forks has undergone certain economic development prerogatives which have decimated the main streets of small towns in the area through retail. We're losing our hospitals and other facilities, medical facilities. Our schools have closed down a large part due to people having to move away because of lack of jobs, which is a result of that sort of thing. And now what the city is doing is basically saying, and as I said at the beginning of this whole process, we're doing this for our farmers. You're certainly not mining, you're not. The thing is that now you're trying to take the last economic pillar away from the small towns. We're going to weaken our co-op elevators, we're going to weaken our other elevators, we're going to weaken the economic structure that we have left in our small towns. It's not doing the region good to overload the capacity of corn buyers, to encourage by public subsidy the destruction of the local elevators, the destruction of what's left in the small towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leak, for being so respectful. I have three different spicers. I'm happy to take you in any order that you wish. I have a Craig, a Chris, and a Michelle, whichever would prefer to speak first. Name and address for the record, please.
Craig Spicer, North Washington Street, Grand Forks. I would just like to say that through these proceedings, you have done the citizens of this town no justice. You've disgraced yourself and us by promoting this business to come to our town. I don't know if you've been bought and paid for. I've woken up every morning and tried to put myself in your position, and I go through you Ms. Mott, Daschler, Kwame, everybody in this room. Ken, guess what? You've embarrassed me, and you've let this town down, and you should be disgraced. You've slapped our Grand Forks Air Force Base in the face. It's just a total loss for the base that's been here that we've worked hard. I've been here for a long time. Many, many, many years we've worked hard before you were here to keep that base here, and now you have the audacity to bring this Fufang plant to our town. I wouldn't show my face on the street. Thank you.
So either Chris or Michelle.
Chris Spicer, 209 Conklin. I only have a couple things to say tonight. Do you guys look at the news? Do you guys see what's going on overseas? Russia, Ukraine, China's on the verge of invading Taiwan. Do you guys not see this? You're going to bring that to our community. I say no.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you, Ms. Spicer. James Hawley. Name and address for the record, Mr. Hawley.
I'd just like to make a few salient points. My name is James Hawley. I live at 924 30th Street South here in Grand Forks. And regarding this Fufang fiasco, I'd just like to make a few comments. The paper says 233 jobs. That's $500,000 per job. Also, they talk about 500 indirect jobs, and they mention trucking companies. How many trucking companies do we have in Grand Forks? Do you imagine that these trucking companies are going to come from all over? They don't pay any taxes to the city. The next subject, where is the water going to come from? How are you going to supply such a monumental amount of water to this operation that takes hundreds of millions of gallons a year? 25 million bushels of corn. Nobody says, is that monthly or annually or what? I would imagine annually. What on earth is the city going to do with the waste problem? Where is that going to go? You're going to build a new plant? You're going to put it in the Red River? And if you do that, what's Canada have to say about it? What guarantees do you have from a communist-owned operation that if this project comes to completion and if it doesn't work out, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay the whole situation when it all comes apart, if it would happen to do so? Also, you're relying on the promises from a communist-owned country, and an owner, the CEO or the chief executive officer, is a man who's directly related to the Communist Party. That's also been stated in the papers. What are the effects on the airbase? Having been in military communications, I know something about that. Don't tell me that they're not going to have the ability to read every comment that comes out of that airbase. And here we are with a project that's coming to the airbase that's supposed to be a top secret project. And don't tell me that those people in the tower down there at this supposed company don't know every word, don't know every detail of whatever they do in that operation. So, if you're going to do anything with this company, I'd say have them put up a $500 million bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cadillac?
Thank you, President Sandy, council members. I'd like to ask you one question now, point it towards you, Mr. Sandy. What keeps getting bigger the more you take away from it? Maybe somebody can help them? A hole. And that's what you guys are doing, digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. And I'd like to make a point right now. I'm not a terrorist. And I heard that watching a video of Todd coming up here the first time. He says, I'm not a terrorist. I don't think there's any terrorists over here. There may be a few over there. Because some of this stuff you guys are asking to bring on in this city do terrify me. They terrified my wife so bad that she said, it looks like we're going to have to move. And she was hoping to die in the townhouse she's lived in for 50 years. And I have something here for you, Mr. Sandy. If you can explain this, I would love to hear it from you. And if you can't, I by all means will. Could you tell me what I just said, Mr. Sandy? I'm sure these gentlemen can tell you. I just stated that I am a free American. I would rather die a free American than to live under Chinese control. You know, I went back on a few of the videos to get my date straightened out. And it's funny, I hit on one on January 22nd before we showed up. And right at the end of the video, you're telling people that they have to be nice to each other, that the city can be a good place to live if you're nice to each other. You have to have good neighbors. You have to have neighbors you can trust. And the city of Grand Forks itself right now is not what you can call a good neighbor. They're sneaking around behind your back. They don't want to tell you the truth. When you ask them questions, they don't answer them. You know, and you've been read the riot actor. You've been told how many times what is really going on. But you keep saying if you hear it once, you'll cease and desist. No, you won't. You're going to have to wait until the DOJ comes in after you sign the agreement, so then they got your signature on it. And that'll be documented proof. Because otherwise, as long as we're on tape, it's all hearsay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cadillac. Mary Jane Cobb. Ms. Cobb.
Hi. Everybody said everything that I already think or have been concerned about. I just want to say, these gentlemen are probably just fine people. It's their government that most people are concerned about. And I don't like the idea of sending money to China that could be spent to harm our allies, ourselves, or the Uyghurs who are slave labor over there. That's one of my biggest concerns, but I don't want to vilify these gentlemen here. I have a petition right here, anyone can sign, to get this project put up for a public vote. Thank you.
Last speaker, a grower, I'm not sure how you say the last name, Sean?
Sean Beauclair.
Beauclair, it's not spelled that way. I think he spelled your name wrong.
Thank you, President Sandy.
Mr. Beauclair, good evening.
Tonight I'd like to add a little more depth as we talk about the vetting of your proposed park. I've heard a lot of talking to the Air Force Base Commander, the mayor, the governor, etc. It concerns me because that's not the proper agency. The proper agency, the acronym is CFIUS, Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. With John Deere tractors, Caterpillar's construction equipment, right? America is to democracy. That's the proper agency should be brought before. It scares me when I see people up here talk like they're experts on the subject. I am not the expert on the subject, but I realize who is. CFIUS is the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. Why is it so important? Can you tell me why it's so important, Mr. Sandy?
Not sure. I'd love to learn.
You should know that, Mr. Sandy. It's not a guessing game. It's not funny.
No, of course we know it's important.
Then why haven't you brought it forward? They have the ability to green light it. If they have concerns, there's a path forward. And most importantly, what do they have the ability to do? Put a fork in it and say it's done. Put a fork in it and say it's done. A project of this size should have been there back in November, not in March. I'm going to go through the 7 departments: Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, Homeland Security, Commerce, Defense, State, Energy, 2 offices, Trade Representative, Technology. Do you know what they all have in common? It's not rocket science. They're there for the best interests of the United States. Almost all of us in this room did what? We said a pledge to the United States of America. Not to North Dakota, not to Grand Forks, but to the United States of America. Can you help me understand how you could say the pledge and not bring this project forward to CFAS? Could anybody help me understand that? It's not a rhetorical question. I'm an American first. This is very important to America. I do not have the expertise. I will ask anybody in the room, have you ever been contacted by CFAS for your opinion? That should tell you something. You're not an expert. They are. I look at our legal counsel. If I was to be involved in a project and had to go something before CFAS, would I bring this current legal counsel? Absolutely not, because it's not a core area of competency. Proper due diligence, you need to get the experts that have been down the path before you guys have. This is no time to have the training wheels on. Right? There's no do-overs in this project. Furthermore, it doesn't cost you a cent. Right? Your agreement with your proposed partner is what? They'll pick up the tab. So why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? We're here for the best interests of America. I cannot understand why you wouldn't bring this before CFAS to get it properly vetted. Can I have one more point? I said pay attention to what your partner hasn't said, hasn't did before. No other thing they haven't did that nobody's talked about. How many are worried they're going to bring in GMO organisms to Grand Forks, North Dakota? Right, when you produce amino acids, most likely it's bacteria or yeast. Furthermore, they have a lab. Do you think that concerns any of the residents of Grand Forks, North Dakota? Are you concerned about that?
Yes, we are.
Pay attention to what they're not saying, more than what they are. Thank you.
Dr. Barber?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I'm grateful for everyone who's spoken before me. I agree with every word that was already said. I'll try to be original here. First, I had the privilege of going to the Shenyang. I'm Elizabeth Barber, 32nd Avenue is my street. I am in fear of giving my address because you people are want to bring communist China to Grand Forks. They kill people in communist China who say where they live, who do anything the state doesn't want. And I don't want to be killed. So you people are scaring the heck out of me. My family goes back more than 100 years, 2 sets of great-grandparents. I've gotten 2 homes on the National Historic Register in this state. The latest one was in Grand Forks, 3 years of slave labor. You want to talk about slave labor? I'm an expert at it. It is in Ward 2. The fumes, pollution, cost, infrastructure, suspect people, sleepless nights will all affect our property directly, which has been in my family since 1940 and in this town since 1894 and has a very distinguished history, a subject which the Chinese care nothing about and want to abolish as soon as possible. That's the Chinese Communist Party. Excuse me if I get them blended into one. Lord knows I'll be steward for it. So, Shenyang, they are refugees from China. They're a wonderful group. They performed at the auditorium here down the street. They were fabulous. One of those scenes was about organ harvesting in China. They did a dance about organ harvesting. Isn't that fun? This is what's going on in communist China. This is what you people are agreeing to without our consent. And I'm sorry I'm yelling. I shouldn't be yelling. I'm not being polite. Excuse me. Oh my God. Then there's the Epoch Times, also written by Chinese refugees. They're the ones exposing the corruption in their country. They're the ones talking about the murders, the people who disappear. Don't tell me this company isn't connected with China. Then, Mr. Weber, you wrote this little 4-page little thing here. It's lovely. It's got very nice colors on it. On page 2, you say, oh, they're a wonderful company. They started First Biotech Inc. on page 2. You know what First Biotech Inc. is? It is a front. One Chinese person works in Athens, Ohio. Another 2 Chinese people, and 5 they won't describe, work in somewhere near in California. Well, I'm not really sure where that is. As a biochemist, I have a doctorate in biochemistry from Oxford. They paid me to do biochemistry and law. They paid me. Why? Because they trusted me. Why? Because I come from a long line of trustworthy, ethical, hardworking people who care about their neighbors. So, this company, First Biotech, is a front. They don't say one word about actual molecules they're working on. Real biochemists, I have 5 patents. Real biochemists are honest. They say real molecules. They don't say we're doing a big, broad brush of research and development. Oh, big deal. That's meaningless. Yeah. And then as far as conflict of interest, Mr. Sandy, you know I've never met you before, and I'm sure you're a wonderful person. You're a family man, and I have huge respect for that. I didn't really know you existed until 6 days ago because I do not have the time to pay sufficient interest to my city council, and I apologize for that. However, I feel it's my duty as an American, as a lawyer, to look up code. So this is the statute on conflict of interest for the state of North Dakota. All lawyers know all they have to do is Google. We can all be Dr. Google in this day and age. So it says, actually, that you do have a conflict of interest on a number of fronts. One of them, you say in your bio, the relevant line is, Dana is also responsible for sales and management of the business side of all Chinese flight training provided by UND Aerospace. Well, that's just great. And Cirrus, the Chinese company, bought the UND company in 2011. Anyway, I'm not licensed in the state of North Dakota, so I can't actually bring a prosecution. But if I were, I could, because just based on this and your job history, as a city councilor, you have a direct conflict of interest, and it pains me deeply to say that. Believe me. Anyway, it's right here. I know I only have 4 minutes, but it's in the code. Executive order. So sorry. Okay, I've got a bunch of stuff. They wanted me to talk about pollution, okay? Here's the Iowa guy, 2011. $1 million fine for a wet corn milling facility planted on an Iowa company by the governor of Iowa. The pollution is unending. Finally, the executive order from President Biden addressing the threat from securities investments that finance certain companies of the People's Republic of China. This is the one thing Trump and Biden agreed on. Keeping this suspect type of business out of our country. The fact that this proposed polluting behemoth is within sight lines, 13 miles of the Air Force Base, makes it a threat to national security on every level. It is inescapable. So, you know, you're going to say you have the vote, but I don't know how you people can sleep at night. I really don't. I never thought I would have to stand before my fellow Americans and get upset about keeping China communism out of my North Dakota town.
Thank you, everyone, for taking your time to speak tonight. Before I close the public hearing, is there anyone else that would like to speak on the item? Yes, sir, please. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Colton. I also do not feel safe giving my address, given the people behind me. I am in support of this. I am very concerned with how aggressive Nazi propaganda has fueled our community's hate towards people of Asian descent. And if the people behind me knew how economics worked in a capitalist sense, in a socialist sense, in a Soviet sense, or in a Chinese sense, they would recognize that they have no idea what they're talking about in reference to how Chinese companies coming to the United States don't help the political ideology of the Communist Party of China. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you. Mr. Gotstead, any other comments for the good of the order?
I don't have any other comments. I think I'm a competent lawyer, though.
Thank you, Mr. Gotstead. I appreciate that. Any comments or thoughts from council? Okay. Yeah, Ms. Mock, you have some thoughts?
You know, Mr. Gusted, I do have a question with the petition that's out there and the effort to collect signatures. That is on a previous decision. How would that impact this? Should it pass, and should they get enough signatures to put it on a ballot, and the question is then raised to the public? What would that do to other decisions?
I can't answer that question because you're raising a hypothetical that I don't have the petition in front of me. The petition hasn't been submitted yet. So I think answering a hypothetical would be not a wise decision, particularly at this meeting.
Sure.
So soon, if a petition or something like that would be filed, our office obviously would work with the city auditor's office and review the petition.
Thank you, Mr. Gusted. I would point out that the mayor sends his regrets that he can't be here this evening. He's currently having dinner with Senator Kramer, with Colonel Curry from the Grand Forks Air Force Base, along with all of our county consultants. They're meeting at the Pentagon tomorrow to visit with military leadership, and then he will be meeting with Senator Hoeven and Congressman Armstrong on this trip as well. Yeah, Ms. Mock.
I did email Senator Kramer's office, and...
Can you speak up a little bit? Hard to hear you at all.
Sure, I'd love to speak up. Is that better?
Much. Yeah, thank you.
Good. I feel like I'm yelling, but I'll talk louder. I did speak to someone in Senator Kramer's staff and did send some messages. There was a consultant provided to the mayor's office, and I understand that they haven't been able to get in touch with that person. I haven't either. I have tried and haven't received a response. This was supposed to be a Chinese expert who could potentially help with further vetting. So I have reached out to Senator Kramer's office. I have asked for further help with that. I'm not sure what kind of response I will get. It seems like the mayor is there. Perhaps our senators and congressmen would be good resources while he is out in DC, but I am pursuing those efforts. I also reached out to the North Dakota Trade Office, and Drew Combs offered to help take the issue to the State Department and perhaps the U.S. Department of Commerce to further ensure that there aren't national security concerns. I don't know that that's going to satisfy people, but I'm continuing to follow up with some of those folks for further information and whatever they can provide.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. Any other comments? Mr. Weber?
Thank you, President Sandy. There were three things that I heard tonight. A lot of it was repeated, but one thing that I heard that was unique from most of the argument, was about the water, the use of water. And of course, this is one of the 20 contingencies that will be investigated. And if there's a concern about water as a result of those studies, then this deal would be shut down. But I think it's important to recognize that the Fufeng plant would be using raw water. We currently water our lawns and do all of our other water with treated water in the city. So the situation last summer, which was also complicated with the opening of a new water treatment facility, when we were asked to cut back on water usage, it's different water than what will be used here. So it's raw water. I don't know that that'll satisfy anyone, but that's worth noting. The next thing is this issue of slave labor. It simply isn't possible for the Fufeng plant to bring in slave labor to Grand Forks. In fact, this will be American workers buying American corn, selling mainly to American companies. And the third point, I don't know if this is probably the dumbest thing I'm going to say tonight, but there was a television show I loved watching when I was a kid, Hogan's Heroes. You may have seen this, where the prisoner of war occupants were able to kind of control all of Germany from their tunnel that they dug under their cots. It's a very funny show, but the idea that the entire security of the future of the United States is hinging upon the decision of 7 council members from a city of less than 100,000. If that were the case, we have a whole lot more to worry about than the development of a plant. And so those are really the only issues that I heard tonight was water, slave labor, and the future security of the United States. And so with that, I will move approval of the resolution and the development agreement.
You won't be here next time either.
Thank you,
Don't
President.
reelect him.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Weber. Is there a second?
Get another job.
Unbelievable. Is there a second?
Don't listen to a thing we say.
Second by Kvamme. Second. Great. Any other comments?
Yes.
Mr. Veen? Yes, sir?
Let me start out with a question for either Mr. Gosted or Mr. Phelan. Can somebody lay out the total decision-making process that's going to go into this long-term approval?
Hey, I'm not, you could ask that again. I'm not sure I followed what you asked.
Can you tell me what the overall approval process is as we go through the finalization of the project? I'll help to start out with. The first thing we approved really was the development agreement, is that right?
Correct.
It's the only document we've approved.
Correct.
The second one now is the pilot?
Correct.
And we've also approved in the development agreement a number of studies that are going to be included?
There were some task orders that were approved because the development agreement required certain studies and certain information to be verified.
And you talked about the fact that those task orders and those studies would ultimately be addressed as a part of the process as we move the project forward?
Correct, because they're meant to get the information from Fufeng and to then be able to evaluate and validate and test what they've provided to us to assure that they've met the various requirements.
So as I best recall, we were going to address street and highway, rail, through the studies, water, raw water, wastewater, stormwater?
That's some of them. There are a host of other requirements that still have to be satisfied under the terms of the agreement. For example, and I go back to this, it talks about satisfying all governmental requirements for the construction, not only of the Fufeng plant, but of the city infrastructure. Governmental requirements is broadly defined to include federal, state, local ordinances, policies, statutes that would have application to both the plant and the city infrastructure. That's an example, and it's intentionally drafted broadly to assure that we've checked all the boxes as we progress through this project.
I was reading, I think,
I'm having a hard time hearing with the,
Could you speak up, Mr. Bain, please?
I'm not, I can hear Mr. Veen just fine. It's the additional discussion that's occurring behind me.
and so, I mean, there's just a ton of steps going ahead. I mean, this is about as complex a project as I recall working on. Not only when we have these two things, even if they are approved, as I understood, the process, it says the city reserves the right to amend and modify this resolution?
It does.
And what, with any such amendment, by further approval of the city council?
Correct.
What all authority does that mean? I mean, it's a very simple sentence, but what does that mean?
It means if you could change the terms of the pilot effectively if you wanted to in the future. It would require obviously an agreement with Fufeng after we've opened up or executed that pilot agreement. But there are things that could be modified, and again, the development agreement contemplates that there could be changes. There could be a change in the assumptions. There could be changes in the law. All of those things are embedded within the agreement to assure that we've checked all the boxes as we progress. So it is intended to be flexible as we progress through this thing, with the understanding that there are a host of conditions that need to be satisfied before work can begin. Now, we also talked, Councilmember Bean, about that chart of potentially some early work being done before all those conditions are satisfied. Every one of those, as I explained at the last council meeting, that would come back to the city council for your approval and consideration before even that work would be started. So everything is going to come back as we progress with the city infrastructure. We're not going to come back with the city infrastructure plan unless the conditions with respect to that city infrastructure have been satisfied. So you're going to see the contract. There'll be bids. You'll see all that stuff as we progress through this.
So one of the environmental issues or air quality is the flume. When will we know the results of the flume study?
That I don't know. That is being evaluated, I believe, by Black and Beach under one of the task orders. And I know they're reviewing it. I just don't know when that might become available.
In the sequencing and the timeline, that could, like many of these, I've talked several times in advance about raw water availability, just water availability, not having a permanent solution to that identified, although we're working on one. Any one of those could be an issue that would be very impactful, as an example.
It could, and if that condition or any condition is not satisfied, then the parties either need to try to resolve that condition, which is usually what you do in a contract. When a condition isn't satisfied, you go back to the other party and say, we got an issue here. Is there a solution to that issue? And if at the end of the day that solution is impossible to reach, then the parties need to look at it, and the terms of the agreement do allow for a termination. But again, I think it's incumbent upon the parties, when a condition isn't satisfied, to at least sit down and talk and see if it can be resolved.
Sure. So we have coming up one of the next phases. This is why I was talking about the timeline, and one of the next issues will probably be planning and zoning, right?
That is an accurate statement, yes.
And we'll have to go through that planning and zoning process. At the same time, I understand that most of the infrastructure studies are still going on, right?
Correct.
And we may need to start doing some plan, specs, design, whatever, of infrastructure before we'll have all the results.
Correct. That's the, Councilmember Veen, if I could interject, that's the very purpose of that letter of credit, is so that that $5 million letter of credit so that in the event the plant doesn't get built for whatever reason, and that we've estimated that that $5 million letter of credit would assist in covering those costs and expenses that the city would be incurring.
Right, so we can do that. Then maybe a question for Mr. Sandy. You talked about the mayor being gone in Washington and the individuals that he's meeting with. Has he indicated the potential for discussion to be able to evaluate the issues we've had as far as foreign government?
I think that would be a question for Mr. Phelan.
City Council, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We are here in Washington. We did have meetings with our senators. And I think when we met with Senator Kramer's office, they do believe it's a local issue that needs to be determined. We have followed up with our base consultant, General Dakota, and he would say at this point in time there are no showstoppers and we should keep moving forward. And if something arises, we need to deal with it at that point in time. And then finally, we are considering moving forward with the national security consultant. And the mayor reached out and they had a discussion today, and I would anticipate some further follow-up in that regards.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Does that answer your question, Mr. Bean?
Yeah, I think the concern I have is the timing of all of this. It'd be nice to have answers as we're trying to go through and do a vote and make these decisions. I'm not against the plan, but I'm concerned about having all the information to also vote for it. I mean, for me, it's a personal dilemma because I have a lot of questions here. This is probably just a few of them, and I don't have answers. I know we don't always get the answers to everything, but the question is, do we have enough answers to feel comfortable with moving forward? That's just what I'm struggling with personally, to try to get, as we go through this decision process.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Mr. Weber?
Can I get a clarification, Mr. Sandy?
Mr. Marichek, good evening.
Yeah, how are you? I didn't fill out a card, but you had advertised in this meeting that this was a notice of competitors about the tax number changes. I don't see any, has that been done, or there was supposed to be a public hearing tonight? Is that part of this?
We did have a public hearing.
Yeah, but is that a part of this?
Yes, that was the public hearing that we held when everyone got up and spoke.
Right, but I didn't see anything about having the property split up in the 5 parcels that were supposed to be split up that had the different tax numbers that you advertised as a public hearing for March 7th. You got a copy of that yet that I gave you? It was, you must have wrote it up, you're the attorney, so it was
It's just another key they forgot to cross.
Mr. Gostick?
Yeah.
Right here, it's a public hearing, notice the competitors of hearing on application for property tax incentives notice. And it changes the property into 5 parcels with different tax numbers.
The information about the real estate was obtained from Fufeng, that was the area that they were acquiring, so we put in all of the property in the notice for competitors.
So you over-noticed?
I suppose if you look at it that way, and as I understand it, the plant is going to be built on a portion of that property.
So do you have an objection, Mr. Madison?
Well, yeah, it never came up. I'm just, you know, why are we having 5 parcels here? You know, if you and I split your property, the county just gives us each a tax ID number. This seems kind of, I just don't get it here. I don't get why you wanted to do this, or why they wanted to do it, unless we're looking at the 3 larger parcels to have some other type of factories on them as well, once this is done. I mean, you know, truth and transparency goes a long ways. I've heard that transparency thing today. And truth and transparency a lot of this wouldn't have been going on if we would have had that. So I'm just curious, because here we have this document that says this is a public hearing for this particular item, and I didn't see anything
This isn't the zoning. This isn't the zoning.
Pardon?
This isn't the annexation. This isn't the.
This isn't. This is a public hearing you had to cut that parcel into 5 different taxation numbers.
No, that is not true.
Read it, Mr. Read it.
30 years, you know the process.
This has nothing to do with planning and zoning. This is an application for property tax incentives notice, which changes the 5 parcels on that piece of property to 5 different taxation numbers. They're listed right here. And it's a public notice, and it was published February 9th and February 16th of 2022.
The pilot doesn't apply.
It doesn't apply.
Unless the property gets annexed and rezoned. Right?
So then why, okay, if it doesn't matter, then why did you do this? Why did you have a public hearing for this if it doesn't matter? Come on, guys. I'm not a lawyer, but you got a public hearing for this.
Thank you, Mr. Matichak.
You're welcome.
I think the transparency.
I'm sorry, our public, if you'd like to make a quick comment, please do.
Quick question for Mr. Freeland. Could you help me understand why you would hire a public, security consultant when you have CFIS? The agency is supposed to protect all the citizens of the United States. What is the security consultant going to do? Help me understand.
Thank you, Mr. Booker.
Could I wait for his response, Mr. Sandy? Is that okay?
Certainly. His response will be that it was Senator Kramer that brought up the concept of vetting this through the consultant.
Rhino.
And so we were engaging with the consultant that was recommended by Senator Kramer. That's the response. Thank you.
Do you feel that's going to help the citizens of the United States feel comfortable that you have a security consultant rather than the agency itself?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Bean?
I guess I would like to certainly recommend that we do use the security consultant or whoever can help us with this. The idea would be if we did find something of sorts, we would have the ability to take that into consideration. Is that right, Mr. Gossett?
That is correct, Councilmember Bean.
Can I ask one question? It's not calming.
Just Ms. Spicer, please.
I have a question. Were you guys all on the city council when the Red River biodiesel plant was brought in? Were you?
Yes, we all.
Were you, all of you? Were you aware of the $200,000 fine they've got from the EPA? You're aware of all the...
We're aware of all the fines. Yes, ma'am.
Were you aware of the bill they got from the city for $1.49 million for plugging the sewer system and got cut down? I just wanted to cut down to $588,000. Did they pay that? Did that Red River biodiesel plant pay that bill? I've asked the Grand Forks Herald. They said they were going to look into it. He wrote the article. I told Mr. Bean all the horrible things that was in the paper about that Red River biodiesel plant that got let go by that you guys seem to kind of ignore. You brought it in. Why can you not tell the city the mess it is?
Thank you.
No, I don't want to thank you. I want to know about this one where Mr. Freeman
I want an answer for once.
did you guys pay, did you get rid of the $500,000 bill?
Thank you, Ms. Spicer. Thank you.
Wow.
No, they don't want to hear about that.
Mr. Weber?
I'll try. The issues with Red River Biorefinery were brought before council. That's all been made public. That's been publicly discussed in the past. Mr. Gaustad, each of the steps Ken has asked about, each of those will come back to council for another discussion and public hearing as well, right?
There will be presentations to the city council. The annexation obviously requires a public hearing process, but as we go through the conditions and we work through all of the conditions of the development agreement, those will be provided to the council as to whether they've been satisfied or not been satisfied. And of course, if they're satisfied, then the infrastructure contracts and the bidding will all again be presented to City Council.
Right. And if the Planning and Zoning Committee decides that the development of this project is contrary to the plan that they've been voting for several years, that would come back to council. Indeed, even if Planning and Zoning agrees that this is consistent with their plan, that will come back to council for our review again.
Correct.
And that'll be a public hearing. And if it's determined that driving by on Highway 2 or sitting on top of a corn mill plant provides deeper intelligence about the goings-on at the airbase than satellites, then that would come back to us and we would consider it at that time as well. Is that right?
If this national security advisor presents that type of information, that would be presented to the council.
Right. And every one of those decision points will be done in public, transparent, with the opportunity for people to kind of express themselves again. Yep.
At a minimum, every council meeting has public comments at the end of the meeting, so certainly.
At least twice a month. So everyone would have an opportunity to come back twice a month during
every council meeting.
Citizen comments.
Why do you oppose a vote? Why can't we vote? Do any of you support a referendum among Grand Forks citizens? I say no. You're all traitors. You're all cowards. And you're all sellouts. And somebody has been paid a lot of money. We want a vote. And I tell you, if you put in a vote in Grand Forks, it'll lose 10-1. And you know it, and that's why you kept it secret. That's why Gary and the one lady said you kept it secret so you wouldn't lose the deal.
That's enough. Thank you. Thank you.
We had enough of you.
I'm sure.
President Sandy?
Yes.
I would just point out that the item for approval tonight is the pilot, and it would not take effect unless the project, if the development occurs.
Right, exactly.
I'll call the question.
Any other comments here? None. There's a motion and second on the floor. Ms. Doppler, something to add?
Just that I would like to vote. I think we're at that point.
Great.
I also don't appreciate my words at a ward meeting where I wish it was recorded. I should have recorded it. I didn't. But then you could have heard what I actually said. So for the folks that did come to my ward meeting, I do appreciate it. You took an evening out of your Friday. Not a great time. I apologize. But you came and you asked questions, and I do appreciate that. And
You support a vote, a referendum? Do we get to say what happens to our state?
I also, I think there comes a point where, and I know that other council members have mentioned this before,
You can all vote for a referendum right now.
Mr. Kelso, you're going to be removed if you don't keep yourself quiet.
whether you agree with how people vote up here or not, that's 100% your prerogative, and I hope that you show up to the polls in June when people are up for their seats to vote. We have dismal voter turnout in June when we are filling our seats for city council. We don't have people that run and have contested seats either, and that speaks volumes to who is willing to engage at this level. It's not easy. The people up here are not perfect by any means.
She said they're not perfect by any means.
I certainly can yell.
Anybody
that knows me knows that I can
Mr.
speak.
Kelso, that's enough.
You need to let her finish.
It pains me that good people will not run for a seat because of this kind of discourse. I think that we can have opposite beliefs. I think that we can still have conversations. I would like to vote.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, there's a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Ms. Dockler dissents. Thank you. Item 3.3.
3.3 is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance relating to hate crimes.
Mr. Costa. I really don't have any further to add, other than what's already been discussed. It's a second reading. There were no changes at the last council meeting, so it's before you unless somebody has a question or comment for me.
Any questions for Mr. Gossett? Then I'm going to open the public hearing. I've got 15 speaker cards, so it would be great. Let's try to keep it high and tight in here, everybody. Mara Ferguson, High Plains, FHC. If we could try to keep our comments to new information and to a minimum, that would be great. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy and City Council. My name is Mara Ferguson. I'm here from High Plains Fair Housing Center. I would ask if everyone could please be quiet as this meeting is going to continue.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you. On behalf of High Plains Fair Housing Center, I would like to again express our full-throated support of the hate crimes ordinance. High Plains, again, we are based in Grand Forks and a private nonprofit with a mission to strengthen communities and ensure equal access to fair housing in the region through training, education, enforcement, and advocacy. Fair housing is a right protected by federal and state laws, and it means you can freely choose a place to live without regard to your race, color, religion, sex, national origin, or because you are disabled or have children in your family, and in North Dakota because you are on public assistance, or because of your age or marital status. Nationwide, fair housing centers play a key role in responding to bias or hate crimes because of the alarming statistic that more than 30% of all bias or hate crimes happen at or near a person's home. Home is a place where a person should feel safe, be able to relax, and be able to recharge and seek comfort with their family. A place where they should not have to worry about harassment from neighbors due to the color of their skin, or their religion, or their gender identity or sexual orientation. Yet, we receive calls on a regular basis from individuals who are targeted simply because of a fixed element of their identity that causes them to feel unsafe in their home, in their neighborhood, and in their community at large. Just last week, I received a call from a woman who was deeply upset because her elementary-aged children could not use the playground of her apartment building without her neighbors yelling at them to go back to where they came from and hurling derogatory racial slurs at them. These are elementary-aged children. There have also been incidents in our community where a swastika was drawn on a sidewalk on a Jewish family's home. And in the summer of 2020, I think you all remember, when a family with black children was rudely awakened to the sound of their next door neighbor standing on the roof of their house yelling white power. These bias-motivated incidents were designed to make residents of Grand Forks feel unsafe and uncomfortable in their own homes. These are things that have been reality for people within this community. Residents of Grand Forks who deserve to feel welcomed, safe, and secure within their own homes. Hate crimes are so fundamentally damaging, not only because of the damage they do to the primary victim of the crime, they sow fear across the entire community and cause others of the same protected class to feel that they cannot move around the community without being under threat of the same crime occurring to them. This is why we feel so strongly that passing this ordinance is so important for our community. It will send a strong message to those who may feel vulnerable or unsafe because they are a member of a protected class, that Grand Forks is a city that cares about them. Thank you for considering this important ordinance, and we urge you to pass this unanimously tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Mark, President AFL-CIO. Mark Fremke. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being here this evening.
You betcha. So anyway, I'm glad to be here in front of City Council tonight, Grand Forks. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Mark Fromke. I'm president of the Northern Valley Labor Council, AFL-CIO, which is the unions. And so we're very proud to be here tonight representing thousands of workers in this city who support legislation that condemns hate crimes. The AFL-CIO historically in our country have fought for dignity and rights of people who did not have rights. There was times in this country, even if you were white and a male, you worked 16 hours a day in a steel mill, 12 on Saturday, and because Sunday was a holy day, only 8. You know, so we fought for justice. We fought for justice with Martin Luther King. We marched for justice with women in the equality movement of the 60s, 70s, and today. And we marched with our brothers and sisters that are gay, those who are transgendered, because we want all Americans to have the right of human dignity. And so we know how the vote went a couple weeks ago, and I'm very, very happy it went so well. And so we're not here to put pressure on you because we're going to win, right? And we're going to win because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing for our state, for our country, for our city, and for our citizens. And so I know you will do the right thing and support this and vote it in unanimously. And we as the AFL-CIO, we just want to say thank you and we salute you.
Thank you, Mr. Fremke. Jasmine Wood.
Hello everyone, I hope everyone's doing very well. Today I'd just like to share a poem written by Haley Amelia that went viral recently in response to the Don't Say Gay bill and several anti-trans bills trying to be passed in the United States right now. Of course, that's luckily not what we're dealing with right now, but I think it illustrates the fear of the LGBTQ plus community of being hate crimed or abused for who they are. Don't say gay, because if the man at the gas station is having a good day, he might just tell you that he can fix it. Don't say gay, because if the man at the gas station is having a bad day, he might just kill you. Don't say gay, because on June 12, 2016, a 29-year-old man fired 202 bullets into a nightclub full of people who had the audacity to love. 53 people left the nightclub wounded, 49 never left at all. Don't say gay, because no amount of pride in the world will remove the shrapnel. Don't say gay, because officers wear bulletproof vests to pride parades where we wear rainbows like shields and pray to a God that does not believe in us. That should the dance beats turn to gunfire, our flags will be big enough to stop the bleeding. Don't say gay, because right now in 6 states, senators are arguing over whether or not trans people deserve doctor's appointments. Don't say gay, because our history is not yet history. Don't say gay, because we have come too far for fight to stop here. Don't say gay, because the past is running into the future. Don't say gay, because Stonewall was 53 years ago and politicians are still painting targets on our backs with the blood of Marsha P. Johnson. Don't say gay, because children are impressionable. Don't say gay, because queer kids might grow up unashamed of the hearts they've inherited. Don't say gay, because if they know that they don't have to be quiet, they might throw the first brick and set the whole inn on fire. There are a lot of people living in fear right now because of who they are. Implementing this ordinance could be the small light in the darkness for the people who are losing hope in humanity as their human rights are being debated in front of them. We are here, we are loud, we are proud, and I really hope that you're listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dockler, Ada Dockler.
Hi, I'm Ada. I live on 902 Stanford Road. I have something to say real quick before I read what I wrote. During that whole ordeal, I have to say I was really scared because I know that even though I'm not Chinese, I know that those people see me as such, and well, I think that's why we need this hate crime ordinance. And I wish they were willing to stay in here and listen, but I don't think they will. Anyway, hi, I'm Ada, and I'm here to speak about the hate crime ordinance. If you haven't noticed, I'm young, and I'm also a member of a few different minority groups, which is why I think it's important that I talk today. We need this ordinance because people need to be held accountable for their actions. Hate crimes don't just affect the survivor, they impact everybody around them. And perpetrators of hate need to face the consequences of their actions. An example I'd like to use is the rise in Asian hate. The rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans has risen 339% over the past year. And that's ridiculous. It's not okay. My family shouldn't have to live in fear, hearing about people getting away with on simple charges because there is no way to pin them to a hate crime. My siblings shouldn't have to grow up hearing about people who look like us being attacked and have nothing being done. This hate crime ordinance could change lives, and I know it won't stop hate. I'm not that naive, but I know it can protect people. I know that it can deter attacks, and I think that's the most important part, is that it shows that you're willing to stand up for all Grand Forks members. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Claire Gaddy.
Grace and peace to you all in the city of Grand Forks. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says that he is not the bringer of peace, but in fact the sword. This was not happy news for him to deliver, for he wasn't talking about right and wrong or being the sword of morality. He was talking about the division, persecution, and execution his followers would face for aligning with him. Swords would be raised against them for following Jesus, even by their own friends and family. The queer and trans community have had swords raised against us as well. In fact, there are many tragic stories today about queer and trans people being hated and abused even by their own family members, as well as losing their jobs because of who they are. Just like the early Christians, we are just trying to live in peace, and we are oppressed for it. Our rights are limited and in some cases taken away. Many of us lose our will to live. People have questioned, what rights are we missing? There are resources to learn about this, like the Human Rights Campaign website, or articles that detail our historical struggles and persecution. The Daily News highlights this as well, with everything going on in Florida and Texas, and soon Minnesota and North Dakota. We had the trans military ban in 2019, which was lifted but is still under attack. There are those who continue to take what is rightfully ours, our equality, our dignity, and our lives. Jesus gives us a special place and protection, not because we are superior, but because he understands our fear and unjust treatment. He takes us in where others have cast us out. We're asking you to support us and stand with us as Jesus does, as this ordinance opens dialogues and acknowledges deeper issues in our society. We can't use the law to change hate into love, but we can use it to support disparaged groups. It can lead to more rights to those lacking them. It affirms the suffering, loss, and persecution of a minority group that is still struggling to find equality and safety. The grace of the Lord be with you in Christ Jesus.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Ms. Gaddy. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gaddy. Ms. Sarah Gilbreth? Galbraith, thank you.
Everybody's doing okay? A couple things I want to remind the entire council with absolute respect is we sat there through the entire thing. And if you noticed, the checks were there. We're checking on each other because we have to. Because we're very aware of the fact that we have to watch out for each other. So again, if you need to take a breath, how about let's just all take a breath. Okay, it's a lot. So this past Saturday, I attended the Feast of Nations at the Alaris Center. Shout out to all that made this event possible and over 600 attendees, as the food, entertainment, and fellowship that happened was spectacular. Many attended traditionally dressed in their clothing from all around the world. Many countries were recognized, and it was a celebration of the countless cultures that make up the fabric of Grand Forks. These events are the cornerstone to celebrating the inclusion that needs to be a part of the daily lives of all that live within this city and the surrounding areas. Without this inclusion, we close our doors to students, workforces, and families that could continue making our population as diverse as this event. I want to take the time to address each and every one of you as city council members. If you are not aware why this hate crime ordinance is important, I personally want to thank every single one of you, your families, your workplaces, the schools you attended, any religious affiliations, and friends that you have in your lives. They have all given you a platform and foundation of safety and wellness that makes it difficult to see what others go through. City Councilman President Sandy, I know that I am grateful to every person in your life that is very supportive of you. When you said those words, they came from a place of misunderstanding, and I get that. And I recognize that if you ever, and that includes all of the City Council, if you ever want to have a roundtable discussion, please feel free to get a hold of me. Because I know that I am grateful to each and every one of my family and community that gives me the strength to be present at each one of these meetings, even at times when I too am emotionally and mentally and emotionally drained. This is still an honor and a privilege as a community member to be here and speak to all of you. As a white, cisgendered, straight woman, this is also my responsibility to continue to raise the voices and support the voices that feel that there is no chair at the table for them because they weren't born to the majority's ideal of who they think they should be. Every city council meeting, our community makes a plan to make sure everyone gets to their vehicles and homes safely. We watch out for each other. We check in with each other because we know the words we may hear and have heard today, and all the words against this ordinance hurt. They are painful. This is a pain that happens daily to many in our community, and to hear that your pain is less than because of the background, presentation, ethnicity, age, veteran status, and identity you carry is very impactful to each of these individuals. It hurts me personally as a family member, a mentor, and a caregiver. Grand Forks' #1 needless export is our youth and their families that continue to leave because they feel that Grand Forks is not the place they want to continue to live due to feeling unsafe or unwelcome. To understand these feelings of being afraid and unwelcome takes empathy. To quote, "Empathy is heartbreaking. You experience other people's pain and joy. Sympathy is easier because you just have to feel sorry for someone." This is your time to show these populations you are willing to show them that you have empathy and love for them too. Thank you.
Thank you. Last name Hirsch. I can't read the first name at all. Hirsch?
Sorry, it's Leah.
Yeah.
My handwriting is not the greatest.
Yeah, that's not Leah at all. Good evening.
So I come to you today as a citizen of Grand Forks. I've lived here for almost 2 years now. I come to you as a citizen who identifies as LGBT. which is hard to say. I'm not accepted all the time. I don't feel welcome here. And like Sarah G said, that's why people want to leave. Because they don't feel safe. And that's why we need this. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Rachel Hafner.
President Sandy and members of the City Council, my name is Rachel Hafner, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ark Upper Valley in Grand Forks. I'm here to share a statement from the Ark Upper Valley and the Ark of North Dakota in support of the proposed hate crime ordinances. The Ark advocates for and with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to protect and advance their human rights and to ensure their full participation as citizens of safe and inclusive communities. Like all citizens, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have a right to justice and fair treatment in all areas of the criminal justice system, including when they become victims of hate crimes. The Ark of the United States reports that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are significantly more likely to be victimized, at least 2 times more likely for violent crimes, and 4 to 10 times more likely for abuse and other crimes. Yet their cases are rarely investigated or prosecuted because of discrimination, devaluation, prejudice that they are not worthy of protection, and mistaken stereotypes that none can be competent witnesses. Their victimization comes in many forms, including violence, oppression, financial exploitation, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking. Throughout history, people with disabilities have been isolated, marginalized, and dehumanized. And while significant work has been done to improve the lives and treatment of people with disabilities, hatred towards people with disabilities still exists. In 2019, the Federal Bureau of Investigation reported 170 hate crime incidences based on disability. And it is likely that the number of victims was much higher than what was reported. Because violence against people with disabilities is underreported, these individuals are considered invisible victims. We cannot see what is not reported. Crimes are underreported for a variety of reasons. Barriers to reporting include communication challenges, being taught to always be compliant and not cause a problem, fear of retaliation, negative interactions with law enforcement or the justice system, and lack of supports and accommodations when reporting. There is significant work to be done in the area of criminal justice to make justice and fair treatment a reality for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and all other disabilities. Today, we can take one step towards that goal. It is time for the City of Grand Forks to pass the proposed hate crime ordinances that address simple assault, criminal mischief, and harassment to stop hate crimes against the protected classes that are identified in the ordinances, including people with disabilities. By voting yes, you are giving people with disabilities the power to speak up for themselves and the power to seek justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Fortwangler. Sorry if I'm butchering these names. Program Coordinator for Global Friends. Good evening.
Thank you, President Sandy and council members. My name is Adam Fortwangler, and on behalf of the Board of Directors and staff of Global Friends Coalition, I'm here today to convey our strong support of the hate crime ordinance. Global Friends' mission is to foster new American integration in the greater Grand Forks community, and it is consistent with this mission and purpose that we urge you to vote yes. The people that we're connected to work so hard to build decent lives for themselves and their families in their home countries, only for it all to be stolen from them. Their livelihoods, their credentials, their businesses, their communities, their sense of belonging and sense of home, taken without remorse, often because someone hated them for who they are and that they simply exist. Accused of having the wrong skin color or ethnicity or religion or gender or orientation, forced from their homes under a gun or knife or promise of either, they sought refuge in the United States, in Grand Forks, in hopes of escaping the hate they faced at home. They believed the U.S. would offer them peace and freedom and safety. They were sold on the American dream. They now work even harder to build new lives, often from scratch, for themselves and their families here. Working sometimes 2 and even 3 jobs, hard jobs. They contribute to the community, pay their taxes, buy homes, put down roots, become citizens, become Americans. And it still isn't enough. The borders that they crossed to get here didn't rid them of the persecution they fled. They simply found new persecutors. Right here, at the grocery store, at the gas station, at a restaurant, going to appointments, going to work, enjoying a park, having a coffee, walking home, right in this room today, 2 weeks ago, trying to live their lives like anybody else. The unfortunate reality for many new Americans in Grand Forks is that everyday discrimination and racism, as awful and as abhorrent as that is, can and does further cross the line into harassment, vandalism, threats, and assault. The majority of people in Grand Forks are decent, and new Americans largely report feeling welcomed. But hate exists here like it does in any city or town throughout the world. We are not immune. The need for people to look over their shoulders when they're out with their family, just trying to enjoy the community, is simply a necessity for many of our neighbors. And not because of their actions or bad luck or the color of their shirt, but because of the color of their skin, the language they speak, who they're holding hands with, the cultural clothing they're wearing, or who they're praying to, who they are. There's a vast difference between being a random victim of crime, simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and being targeted for violence out of hatred because of something about you that you have no control over. One shakes an individual, the other shakes a community's soul. Implementing this ordinance will not be a solution to hate, but it is a vital opportunity to send a message that our leaders listen, that our leaders care, that hate has no home in Grand Forks, and that all people are welcome to build their lives here in peace. That for everyone, regardless of where you're originally from, Grand Forks can and should be home. Please support this ordinance and vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline Hassett.
Hello, everyone. I wasn't planning on speaking today because I spoke last time, but then I saw such a display earlier. I felt that there needed to be some contradiction, and I want to speak a little bit to the fact that this side of the room, mostly, is speaking against a hate crime ordinance because they are very fearful of people who are already here in our community. As opposed to a fear of some communist Red Scare. I'm not really quite sure. All of the arguments on that side, we're keeping our composure, despite the fact that we have some very real fears walking out of here, having spoken and been out. And we're being respectful. And so I'm not really saying this to you. I'm saying it for people who are watching. I'm saying it for people who left the room and who may watch this later. That here we are fighting for just basic rights and human dignity often on this side of the room. And we're not being disrespectful and loud and mean and hateful and racist. And I think that's a big distinction. I just want to speak a little bit to the fact of that there is that real fear. I think sometimes if you're not from a minority class, you don't quite understand that. The women on the council probably understand it a bit more. I used to teach self-defense at the university. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when you are from a minority group who has had a history of violence, who sees other people have violence committed against them, you actually have things that you think about in your daily lives that other people don't think about. Do I jog alone? Do I stay up late? Do I work the night shift, or is the morning shift safer? Is that not as safe as the night shift? Things I have to think about. Do people think I'm Native American, or do they know that I'm Mexican American? And which bigot am I going to come across? And I'm going to quote somebody very wise in my life: bigots don't announce they're bigots. You know, they don't say, hey, I'm on city council or school board and I am a bigot. Hey, I'm the CEO of this company and I'm a bigot and I hate this kind of person. It comes in very small ways, right? I'll have someone say they're not attacking me because I'm gay and I'm in a same-sex marriage, but they'll have dinner with someone who's very adamant in advocating for anti-LGBT policy at the state level, right? So these things are intertwined, and we're observant, and we have to take safety measures all the time to ensure that we're safe. I have to make decisions about what I talk about in terms of my race, if I talk about whether I have a wife at home, whether we have a child together. I have to be careful in every conversation with a new person because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to get. I have to be careful when I'm walking alone. I have to be careful when I apply for a job and what I disclose. I have to be careful about tons of things. And that's something that not everybody has to live with. And so I would encourage people watching, if you're finding yourself not understanding why something like this is needed, we have policies like this because bigots are in hiding and they will come out if there's not policy against it. Thank you for listening. I do agree with Mr. Fromke that we're going to win tonight. And I really appreciate all of the words that he spoke to, as well as everybody else. Thank you for your bravery and for coming out.
Thank you. I can't tell if this is Barry or Bonnie Nelson.
Barry.
Barry. Mr. Nelson.
Good evening, Chairperson Sandy and members of the Grand Forks City Council. My name is Barry Nelson. I'm the Interim Executive Director of North Dakota Human Rights Coalition. And we are a statewide membership-based organization. We work on providing education and advocacy around human rights for all peoples. And certainly, hate crime ordinance falls within that jurisdiction. And we believe very strongly and support very strongly the passage of this ordinance in the city of Grand Forks. I've sent you an email before the first meeting. I sent a more extensive testimony through Councilperson Dockler. And it's been a long, long night, so I'm going to keep my comments really brief. I just heard the mayor, I believe at the last meeting, say that his preference would be that a law of this nature would be handled at the state level. I could not agree more. This is our preference, that the state would pass a hate crimes ordinance, and we have been working hard to do that. The time has not come, and I'm not sure when it's going to come with our state legislature. So this is the next best thing. I want to commend the Grand Forks City Council for their actions so far on this important ordinance. I want to commend those Grand Forks citizens who have spoken their truth to power over and over again. And I want to emphasize that the ordinance is needed. I think we've heard ample evidence already that's presented this evening. But I started working on hate crime in North Dakota in 2017, working with Michelle Ridds with the High Plains Fair Housing and the Afro-American Development Association. And if there was any question in my mind that hate crime existed in North Dakota, the dozens, if not hundreds of people coming before us, total strangers, to tell their stories of the experiences they had living in our state removed all doubt. At the same time, I discovered that North Dakota was second highest in hate crime reports according to the FBI for 3 years running, 2014 through 2017. And it's always been referenced by the ARC, that the Southern Poverty Law Center indicates that hate crimes are underreported by 50%. So even in states that have laws in place, they are grossly underreported for reasons that have already been cited. So I'm just going to close by echoing my friend Mark Fromke. I know tonight you're going to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Foster? You didn't put an address on here, so if you'd be willing to share that for the record.
I will, yeah. Good evening, City Council, President Sandy. I moved to North Dakota about a year and a half ago, I would say. I got here in December, in the dead of winter. It was during a blizzard, and it was a particularly austere place to arrive to. Certainly wasn't warm, but I didn't really know what the people were going to be, and I wasn't sure if they were going to be welcoming or not. I am a Hispanic trans woman. I also happen to be a lesbian. So there were a lot of concerns for me entering the community that really weren't assuaged by my first experiences being out and trying to find housing and make purchases that were important to my moving in and everything. I have gotten a lot of eyes on me just in pretty much everywhere that I've ever been while I've lived here, regardless of whether I'm just with friends or if I'm out alone just buying toilet paper at Menards. Generally speaking, the presence of the town does not feel very inviting. There's always a sense of, you're not really from around here, are you? That permeates pretty much everywhere that I've ever been. I think this hate crime ordinance is important because it will solidify the community being behind the queer community and communities of color and indigenous communities as a whole. It will signify that the community supports this kind of an effort. The community supports punishing not just crimes of opportunity, but also, in particular, crimes of bigotry that are planned and premeditated. It's not going to stop anything. As many people have said already, I fully recognize that bigots are bigots, and they're out there, and they're going to commit these kind of crimes if they want to, regardless of whether or not there's a statute in place or anything. But the ordinance exists to give a sense of, at least a mild sense of acceptance. It's certainly not the end of the road for this kind of legislation. I don't think anywhere in the United States. This is pretty basic for a lot of other places. But it'll at least instill a sense of the community actually wants us here on the whole. And I think that's really important because I speak from the queer community. In a lot of instances, we get ostracized from our friends, our jobs, and our families. And having the community as a whole just outright reject you and say, no, you don't deserve these protections. We don't really have a problem with treating a crime of hate the same as a crime of opportunity is really discouraging. And I think a lot of people factor that in when they are thinking about leaving, or potentially if they're desperate enough, sorry for the mention of it, but taking their own life. I've had a lot of friends in the trans community that have gone down that path, and it's not wonderful. I had to deal with a situation like that today. So I think that's why this ordinance is very, very important, is for the protection of everyone, and that's at least a modicum of safety for minority communities in North Dakota.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colton Milleron? Millero? Wow.
It's like the word mill and the word iron smashed together as well.
Got it. Milliron. Yeah, good. Hi, Colton.
Hello. I want to preface immediately that I'm not a communist. I don't know if people might get that impression from me, but my name is Colton, and I use the pronouns they, them. I am transgender, and I am non-binary. I moved to Grand Forks from out west for a better life, and I wanted to find a place where I could start a family, become an active member of my community, and be happy. When I got here, however, I recognized just how deeply exclusive this place is for people like me. Not just exclusive to people who are transgender, those who are queer, members of the Hispanic community, but everyone who doesn't seem to fit the mold of a Western European cisgendered heterosexual man. I recognize how those of marginalized groups, including women, are treated as second-class citizens here. We are victims of discrimination and slurs delivered to us behind our backs, overtly to our faces, and through the insincere lips of Minnesota nice. I know that I will be a victim of a hate crime in Grand Forks, whether it's the word faggot spray painted on my car because I'm queer, having a rock thrown at me from a passing car because I have brown skin, or harassed because I'm transgender. I want the assailant to be convicted, and I want the crime to be documented for what it truly is. Hate crime legislation is needed now more than ever, whether it is a city ordinance or recognized as statewide felonies, because on the outset of war, those who are deemed enemies of the state based on the way that they speak or who their ancestors are prime targets for lawless criminals. We need to protect everyone in our community from hate crimes, and I think we can make Grand Forks a safer place, a more inviting place for future generations, and we can start by passing this ordinance. A further deterrence for those would-be criminals and a groundwork for more substantial hate crime legislation in Grand Forks and North Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Colton. Jennifer Bradford.
President Sandy, council members. My name is Jennifer, and I live at 312 University Avenue. I wasn't originally planning on to speak, but I felt called to do so. I'm a graduate student here at UND. First of all, I wanted to say thank you guys for what you guys do. We were all here at this meeting. It was hard. A lot of emotions were happening. And I just want to acknowledge that your jobs are not easy. And although my beliefs may not always align with yours, I respect you. And you're here and you're listening to our stories, and that means a lot. So I just wanted to let that know, and that thank you guys. I was here at the last council meeting, and unfortunately I was not able to speak because I had to leave early. And I was wearing pretty much similar to what I'm wearing right now. And let me tell you, you saw how busy this council meeting was and last council meeting was. I was anxious and a little scared to be leaving by myself in the middle of the meeting. I had to go through crowds of people that were standing outside that door just waiting. I've got looks, you know. The general vibe was not the great, but that's the whole point of this hate crime ordinance. I shouldn't be scared just to walk outside those doors because of what I'm wearing and my sexual orientation. I think a lot of what's been said doesn't need to be repeated, but with the atmosphere in this country right now towards minorities, including the LGBTQ people, with such hatred, homophobic and transphobic laws that are being passed in different states, including my own home state of Texas, knowing that the city of Grand Forks supports us and loves us is very crucial. This hate crime ordinance helps sets a standard that hate is not accepted in our community, and I can't tell you the security and safety that brings just to know that my community loves me and accepts me. Thank you guys.
That's all the speaker cards. Anyone else have anything to add? Feel free to come to the podium, state your name, and if you're willing, your address for the record.
My name's Gretchen Graff. I live on 24th Avenue in Grand Forks, and I have for 28 years. And I wasn't going to speak, and I'm wanting everyone who has spoken to know that I don't feel that there's anything that needs to be added to the eloquence that we've heard. To the best of my knowledge, I have never considered myself to be a person who exhibits any of the categories on the list of this ordinance. And yet, this ordinance is for me too, because it talks about who we are and what we can be as a community. And like the others, I think you're going to pass it, and I think you're going to pass it not only because we love and care for the folks who have shared their stories with such courage at great risk. I think you're going to pass it because of who you are and because of the leadership that you show in this community, and because you have the courage to say this ordinance is for all of us and it's about who we hope to be. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Graff. Yes?
Council President Sandy, members of the council, thank you for having me. My name is Matthew Turnus. I live at 1916 7th Avenue North. Like a couple others, I wasn't really planning on speaking tonight, but have felt compelled and encouraged by the love I'm kind of feeling in this room right now by our neighbors. So thank you all. I've been present at all the other council meetings and committee of the whole meetings with this discussion, and something has been sitting on my mind. A question was asked by one of our council members, and it was, shouldn't we be trying to stop all crime? Shouldn't we be trying to stop all crime? And that I've thought about that for a long time. In my work, I work with businesses and organizations to recognize and respond to harm. So I would love nothing more than for us to find ways to stop all crime, or at the very least, if crime is committed, have the people who have experienced crime or harm or violence have the avenues to seek justice. So city council members, to keep it short, stopping all crime includes stopping hate crime. So this policy, this ordinance, I think is going to benefit our community, and like others, I foresee you all supporting this as well. So thank you all for the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Turnus. Is there anyone else in the audience interested in speaking? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Ms. Dockler?
President Sandy, I would like to make a motion to pass the ordinances and take a vote.
There's a motion by Dockler. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Veen. Any other comments?
Mr. Sandy, I'd just like to say something quickly.
Yes, Mr. Weigel?
I know Ms. Dockler and Mr. Veen have already made a motion in a second. I don't claim to be an expert in everything. I've sat here and listened to everything, and sorry I couldn't be there tonight. But the one thing I do know a little bit about is our criminal justice system and prosecuting crimes. And as I've sat back and just listened, I think the people that have come and talked to us tonight, they want to see people held accountable for crimes that are committed. And I truly believe that, based on my experience, the enhancement is the much better way to go as far as our hate crime ordinance. I believe that it makes it easier to charge and hold people accountable for the original crime, as well as the enhancement that will come up if the prosecutor sees that there is evidence of some type of bias. And I do believe that the way that this ordinance is written currently, it's going to be very difficult for our prosecutors and our law enforcement at times to enforce it, because it's going to be an all or nothing. It's going to either be we charge the hate crime ordinance and we lose the conviction based on not being able to prove that fourth element, whereas the enhancement, if we prove all the elements of the crime, we still get a conviction and we can still go after the enhancement. I just feel that the way it's currently written, it's not going to be able to be used to its full potential. And I feel like we're putting prosecutors and victims of crime in a bad position to have to make a decision on what they'd like to see done if they were to be a victim or a survivor of a crime. Those are just my thoughts, and I'm ready to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. More comments? Ms. Dockler, further comments? Okay, so Mr. Weigel, just so I understand, is your intention to support this this ordinance, or are you not supportive of this ordinance at all and in favor of the enhancement?
I'll support it, but I just want people to know, because I understand that, like, I'm not an expert in engineering, so I weigh heavily on the people that work in that line of work. I'm not an expert in aerospace, so when we have opportunities with the UAS sector, I look to other people on the council. I will support it, but I want people to be forewarned that there is the chance that this won't be charged out, but we also have another opportunity right in front of us where we can secure a conviction for somebody for criminal mischief or assault, and also have the enhancement without losing everything because we can't prove the fourth element of a crime. That was written when we first started going over this in our staff report that I looked up. So I just want, my biggest thing is I want people to understand that proving this fourth element is difficult. Proving the other three of a crime on certain ones is easier to do, plus we can go for the enhancement. So I just want people to understand that it can be very difficult to do. And if people are okay with that, just the ordinance versus the enhancement, then I'm willing to vote in favor of it. But I want people to also have all the knowledge to make a decision as well.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. Ms. Dockler?
So I'm not an expert in the law by any means. I am in social services, and I deal with people and I work with people. That's my job, and I currently am going to school at UND to further my education to be a social worker. That's my field of expertise, and where I want to be. I worked with individuals within the community that do have law experience, as well as similar profession as you, Councilman Weigel, in order to create these ordinances that we brought forward. The initial enhancement that was discussed was not something that I was interested in pursuing because there were quite a few clauses that were included in it, in which it also was tied to the use of a weapon in instances in which the enhancement could be applied, and also at the discretion of the judge. And whether or not, even if the prosecuting attorney brought it forward as an enhancement, the judge could decide to not continue to use in the final decision. Now, we could go around and around. I see Mr. Gosted's getting lawyerly, and that's for lack of a better term. We could go round and round about this, but we did decide to move forward with the ordinances for a very specific reason. I think the fear that some folks in this community have had in regard to the ordinances is that they would have been slapped on every single charge that came up, that somebody would be crying wolf constantly. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. However, I'm also willing to work with our legal representation. Mr. Quinn was very helpful in creating something that would make that not happen. I also think that our city attorney or our city prosecutor will use her expertise, and any future city prosecutor after her will use her expertise to apply it in a way that is going to be the best. We created ordinances essentially that went side by side so that if the hate crime element couldn't be proven in court, they would still have a mechanism to pursue justice for that individual. However, if they were able to meet that fourth element, then it would be in our city laws, our city ordinances, in order for them to prosecute in that manner and essentially call a spade a spade. I think that's important, even if it's just semantics. We can go around and round about semantics. I don't mean to be offensive, Mr. Gosted, but I think that's what lawyers do. They go around in semantics. That's their job. At this point, I appreciate your comments, Councilman Weigel. I really do, and we've had this discussion, certainly as we've gotten up to this point. But I am ready to vote, and I'm not interested in changing my motion.
Mr. Sandy?
Yeah, Mr. Weigel.
I appreciate what Ms. Dockler's saying. I think where the confusion is with the firearm is when Mr. Quinn wrote that, he wrote it as an example of the enhancement, not necessarily that you would need a weapon to prove the enhancement. So, like I said, I just want people to be aware. If people are fine with that, then so be it. I'm willing to do that and vote in favor of it. But I also don't want this coming back and saying, well, we didn't know this is how it was going to work. I want people to have all the information, make their decision, and go from there. But like I said, personally, I do think the enhancement is better. Right now, the judge still has discretion in this. And so I think it's interesting to see how it'll work out in the future, if it's charged out or when it's charged out. I don't believe people are going to go out and cry wolf. That never crossed my mind. But I just, like I said, want people to have knowledge and understand that the whole case could be thrown out because we try push for that hate crime ordinance versus the other one, that somebody could be found not guilty for it, and then we have nothing. So I just want people to be aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. I think we are now all fully informed on that, and I would guess that if that situation happens, we'll get to have another meeting just like this to talk about our ordinances. There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
3.4 is a public hearing and determination of protests for the following projects. Project 8497, District 223 streetlights for 20th Avenue South, South 25th Street to South Columbia Road, and Project 8498, District 224 streetlights for South 23rd Street, 30th Avenue South to 32nd Avenue South. We have received no protest on either of these projects.
Great. Any questions before I open the public hearing? Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience interested in speaking on item 3.4, please make yourself known. 3.4, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Moved by Weber, second by Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Under action items, who wants action items pulled? Anybody have any action items they want pulled? Then that leaves item 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 410, 411, 412, and 413. Moved by Weber, second by Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have no information items. We have one request for a citizen comment. Is Mr. Matichek still here? Frank Matichek. Frank Matichek. Frank, he did actually speak for a little bit. He wanted to speak about some other items. We'll get him at the next meeting. Under item 7, approval of bills. 7.1, vendor list and engineer's estimates. Moved by Weber, second by Mock. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Anybody review the 7.2 minutes? Moved by Weber, great. Dockler seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. No city administrator. Comments? Ms. Dockler?
The only comment I have is thank you for everyone that attended Feast of Nations. I appreciate that you were here and that hopefully you enjoyed it, and then also that I am very appreciative of people that spoke their truth tonight in regards to the hate crime ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Weigel, I missed you. Anything this evening?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
No, thank you, President Sandy.
Great. Mr. Kavami?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Veen?
Just very quickly, I know we had two different subjects that were spent a lot of time having people talk about. I think what it showed was that we live in a country where people can speak their piece, their mind. We may not all agree, but we were able to do it, listen, and still make decisions.
Thank you. Vice President Mock.
I did get a very interesting phone call today from somebody who was angry about sidewalk assessments, and it was strangely refreshing to go back to sidewalk issues because typically that's what we're dealing with is those types of things. So I'll reach out to city engineering and see if there could perhaps be tweaks that we could discuss about how to better inform people of sidewalk assessments and when they may need those improvements, and go back to some of the services we typically do.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. Yes, Mr.
If
Weber?
I may, very quickly,
You've got nothing better to do.
Thanks. I was giving credit for writing the frequently asked questions pamphlet. I had nothing, I had no hand in that. That was the product of the Economic Development Corporation. It's a fantastic document. Anybody has questions about the Fufeng project, I'd recommend taking a look at that. Thank you.
I would agree. It's on grandforks.org. You can get it right from their homepage. You can read it online or download a PDF and print it if you wish. You can share it with your friends. You could even have a nice discussion with your neighbors and ask them their opinion on those points. I think tonight was probably one of the most disappointing council meetings I've ever been to. It was a lot of emotion. I'm actually a little bit emotional about it. The personal accusations from people is getting very hard. And the good news is I love fighting. And so I'm happy to continue to deal with it because it's what we have to do. And people lose sight of how important economic development and growth of our community is for all of our community, for the betterment of all the businesses, not just the 7 businesses in Faulkner Township. I don't want to do any undue harm to them, but this is a very significant opportunity for our entire community, for all the businesses in our community, and it's something that we need to continue to have the intestinal fortitude to move forward while we're doing the due diligence, making sure that they're meeting all of the requirements. Is there a motion to adjourn? By Weber, second by Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you.